The warehouse floor was flooding. Ethan Vale's hands were bleeding. And somewhere in the dark Seattle night, Victoria Sinclair, the CEO who'd fired men for being 5 minutes late, was walking straight toward him with an expression he couldn't read. He'd been alone in this crumbling building for 6 hours, desperately trying to save a system that would take everything from him if it failed. The storm outside was tearing through power lines. Water was seeping through ceiling cracks. His daughter's asthma inhaler sat empty in his truck because he couldn't afford the refill until Friday. And now the woman who controlled his entire world was standing in front of him, watching him bleed. "You're still here," she said quietly. That's when Ethan realized his life was about to change forever. He just didn't know if it would save him or destroy him. If you want to see how a single night can rewrite 2 broken lives, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the C-Tech Logistics warehouse flickered like dying heartbeats. Ethan Vale squinted at the screen in front of him, his vision blurring from exhaustion. The numbers weren't making sense anymore. They hadn't made sense for the past 3 hours. His back ached, his fingers were cramping. The coffee he'd made at midnight had gone cold in a chipped mug, balanced precariously on a stack of shipping manifests that should have been filed 2 weeks ago. Outside, the November rain hammered against the metal roof with a violence that made him think of Lily. She'd been scared of storms ever since that night 2 years ago, when the power went out and her breathing got so bad he'd had to carry her to the ER in his arms because the truck wouldn't start. Ethan checked his phone. 3:47 a.m. No messages. Mrs. Chen next door was watching Lily tonight, had promised to call if anything went wrong. The silence should have been reassuring. Instead, it made his chest tight. He turned back to the monitor and swore under his breath. The entire automated sorting system was crashing, not slowly, not with warning. It was hemorrhaging data like a wound that wouldn't close. Somewhere in the network architecture, something fundamental had broken, and if he couldn't patch it before the morning shift started at 6, the company would lose millions in delayed shipments, and Ethan would lose his job. He couldn't lose this job. The thought moved through him like nausea. He was already 2 months behind on rent. The landlord had stopped making threats and started speaking in the careful, apologetic tone people use right before they evict you. Lily's medication cost $400 a month. The truck needed new brakes. His work boots had a hole in the left sole that he'd been ignoring for 6 weeks because new ones cost money he didn't have. If he lost this job, they'd be homeless by Christmas. So Ethan did what he always did. He pushed the panic down into that locked space in his chest where he kept everything he couldn't afford to feel, and he started typing. The code was a mess. Someone, probably Craig from the day shift, had tried to implement an update without testing it first. The whole system was choking on corrupted routing data. Ethan began isolating the damaged sections, his fingers moving faster now, finding a rhythm. He'd taught himself programming during lunch breaks over the past 2 years, watching free tutorials on his phone while eating gas station sandwiches in the parking lot. Nobody at C-Tech knew he could do this. They thought he was just another warehouse grunt who moved boxes and didn't ask questions. That's how he'd stayed employed for 3 years while other people got laid off. Invisible, reliable, forgettable. But tonight, invisible wasn't enough. At 4:15, the main server started making a grinding noise that shouldn't have been physically possible. Ethan's heart dropped. He scrambled out of his chair and ran across the warehouse floor, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The server room was in the back corner, behind a door that was supposed to stay locked but never did. Inside, the temperature was 20 degrees hotter than the rest of the building. The ancient cooling system wheezed like an asthmatic trying to run a marathon. Ethan could smell burning plastic. No, 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 no! He yanked open the server cabinet. Smoke was curling out from behind a panel that was supposed to regulate power distribution. The storm must have caused a surge that the building's outdated electrical system couldn't handle. Ethan grabbed a fire extinguisher off the wall, then stopped himself. If he used it, he'd fry everything. The company would still lose millions, and he'd definitely get blamed for destroying equipment instead of saving it. He had maybe 10 minutes before the whole thing melted down. His hands were shaking as he grabbed his phone and pulled up the electrical schematics he'd photographed 6 months ago during a routine maintenance check. Nobody had asked him to document the building's wiring. He'd done it because Lily had been sick that week, and he'd needed something to focus on besides the fear that he might lose her. Now those photos might save both of them. Ethan traced the power flow with his finger. If he could manually reroute the current away from the damaged section, the system might stabilize long enough for him to finish the software patch. It meant shutting down half the warehouse power grid in the middle of a storm. It meant working in the dark with live electrical panels. It meant doing something dangerous and unauthorized that would probably get him fired even if it worked. He thought about Lily asleep in their tiny apartment. Thought about her laugh when he did silly voices reading bedtime stories. Thought about the way she'd asked him last week if Santa was real because some kids at school had been talking. "I need you to believe in magic a little longer, baby," he'd told her, even though he'd stopped believing in it himself years ago. Ethan grabbed a screwdriver and got to work. The first panel came off easily. The second one didn't. The screws had corroded from moisture damage, and one of them stripped when he tried to force it. He had to pry the whole thing loose with a crowbar, and when it finally gave way, the metal edge sliced across his palm. Blood welled up, hot and immediate. Ethan pressed his hand against his jeans and kept working. He found the circuit breakers he needed, flipped them. Half the warehouse plunged into darkness. The emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in a sickly yellow glow that made the shadows look wrong. Ethan ran back to his computer. The server was still smoking, but the grinding noise had stopped. On the screen, the system was trying to stabilize. He had maybe 20 minutes now, maybe 30 if he was lucky. His fingers flew across the keyboard, code scrolled past. Error messages flashed and disappeared. The warehouse was so quiet he could hear the rain hitting the skylights 40 feet above his head. He forgot about the pain in his hand, forgot about being tired, forgot about everything except the numbers in front of him. At 5:23 a.m., the system finally stabilized. Ethan sat back in his chair, breathing hard. His hand was still bleeding. His shirt was soaked with sweat. The warehouse smelled like burnt electronics and ozone. But the crash had stopped. He'd done it. Relief hit him so hard he nearly laughed. Then he realized he still had to restore power to the rest of the building before anyone arrived for the morning shift. And he had to clean up the blood on the keyboard before someone asked questions. And he had to come up with a story for why half the circuit breakers were flipped. Ethan stood up too fast and the world tilted sideways. He grabbed the desk to steady himself. When was the last time he'd eaten? Yesterday afternoon, maybe? A pack of crackers from the vending machine. He made it 3 steps toward the server room before he heard the sound that stopped his heart. Footsteps. Someone was in the warehouse. Ethan froze. It was 5:30 in the morning. The building should have been empty for another 20 minutes. Night security made their rounds at midnight and 4, never in between. The cleaning crew didn't arrive until 7. The footsteps were getting closer, confident, unhurried. Ethan's mind raced. If it was a supervisor who'd come in early, he was screwed. There was no good explanation for why he was alone in the dark with half the power shut off and blood on his hands. They'd think he'd been sabotaging something. They'd call the police. He looked around frantically for somewhere to hide, but the warehouse was too open and the emergency lights left nowhere dark enough. The footsteps stopped. "You're still here." The voice was female, calm, with an edge to it that made Ethan think of expensive lawyers and depositions. He turned around slowly. Victoria Sinclair was standing 15 feet away, watching him. Ethan's brain stuttered to a halt. He'd seen the CEO exactly twice before in 3 years. Once during a company-wide meeting where she'd announced layoffs without flinching, and once from a distance in the parking lot, getting into a black Mercedes that probably cost more than he'd earn in 5 years. She looked different up close, younger than he'd expected. She couldn't be more than 30. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that probably had a name he didn't know. She wore a gray coat that looked soft and a pair of heels that would have been stupid for a warehouse floor if she'd been anyone else. But mostly what struck him was her eyes. They were sharp and cold, and exactly the kind of eyes you'd expect from someone who'd built a logistics empire before she was old enough to rent a car. Except right now, those eyes looked confused. "I asked you a question," Victoria said. Ethan realized he'd been staring. Yes, ma'am. I'm still here. It's 5:30 in the morning." "Yes, ma'am." "Why are you here?" The truth tried to climb out of his throat, but Ethan shoved it back down. He couldn't tell the CEO that he'd just spent 6 hours illegally accessing systems he wasn't authorized to touch and shutting down half the building's power grid. "There was a problem with the sorting system," he said carefully. "I stayed to fix it." Victoria's expression didn't change. "That's not your job." "No, ma'am." So why did you do it? The question hung in the air between them. Ethan could feel blood from his hand soaking through his jeans. He was exhausted and hungry, and his thoughts were moving like sludge. Because if I didn't, he heard himself say, the morning shift would have walked into a disaster. The company would have lost shipments. People would have gotten blamed, maybe fired. Wo stas sikicha? Why do you care? The bluntness of it caught him off guard. For a second, Ethan forgot he was talking to someone who could destroy his life with a phone call. Because I need this job, he said honestly. And so do a lot of other people. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Not quite surprise. Something else. Like she'd heard an answer she hadn't expected. She walked closer. Her heels clicked against the concrete. Up close, Ethan could see she looked tired too. There were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Your hand is bleeding, she said. Ethan glanced down. His palm was still oozing. Yeah, sharp metal. You should get that looked at. It's fine. It doesn't look fine. With respect, ma'am, I've had worse. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Ethan couldn't read her expression. He'd worked for people like her before, people with money and power and the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about rent. They usually looked at him the way you'd look at furniture. Useful when you needed it, invisible when you didn't. But Victoria wasn't looking at him like that. She was looking at him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. What's your name? She asked. Ethan Vale. How long have you worked here, Ethan Vale? 3 years? In the warehouse? Yes, ma'am. And you know how to fix automated sorting systems? The trap was so obvious it was almost insulting, but Ethan was too tired to lie well. I taught myself some programming, YouTube mostly. YouTube. Yes, ma'am. Victoria almost smiled. It was a strange expression on her face, like a muscle she didn't use very often. Do you know why I'm here at 5:30 in the morning? No, ma'am. I got an alert that half the building's power grid went offline. I thought we were being robbed. Ethan's stomach dropped. That was me. I had to shut down some circuits to keep the server from catching fire. I was about to turn them back on. Show me. It wasn't a request. Ethan led her to the server room. He was acutely aware of how terrible he must look, covered in sweat and blood, limping slightly from a knee that had been bothering him for weeks. Next to Victoria, in her perfect coat and her perfect heels, he felt like something that had crawled out of the machinery. He showed her the damaged panel, explained what had happened. She listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. This building's electrical system hasn't been updated in 15 years, she said finally. I know. It's a fire hazard. Yes, ma'am. And instead of calling someone, you decided to risk electrocuting yourself. Ethan didn't have a good answer for that. I didn't want the system to crash. Why not? The question caught him off guard again. Because people depend on it. The routes, the deliveries. If everything backs up, drivers don't get paid, clients get angry, jobs get cut. You're worried about other people's jobs. Aren't you? The words came out before he could stop them. Ethan tensed, waiting for her to fire him on the spot. But Victoria just looked at him with those sharp, cold eyes. Most people who work here would have let the system crash and blamed it on maintenance, she said. They would have gone home. I'm not most people. Clearly. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Ethan's heart was pounding. This was it. She was calling security. Richard, Victoria said into the phone, I need you to send someone to the main warehouse. Electrical damage in the server room. Have them do a full inspection of the building's power systems and get me a report by end of day. She paused. Yes, I'm aware it's Sunday. Pay them overtime. She hung up and looked at Ethan. Go restore power to the rest of the building. Then go home. I need to finish the system patch. It's done. Ethan blinked. What? Victoria turned her phone around. On the screen was a remote access dashboard showing the C-Tech network. Everything was green, running smoothly. I've been monitoring it from home for the past 2 hours, she said. Your patch worked. The system's stable. You were watching? I'm always watching. There was something unsettling about that. About the idea that the CEO had been sitting in her house at 3 in the morning monitoring warehouse servers. "Why didn't you come in sooner?" Ethan asked. "I wanted to see what you'd do." The admission was so casual it took him a second to process. She'd been testing him, watching him bleed and panic and nearly electrocute himself, and she'd been testing him. Ethan felt something hot and angry stir in his chest. "That's pretty cold." Victoria's expression didn't change. "Yes, it is." She said it like she was agreeing with a weather report, like being cold was just a fact about herself that she'd accepted a long time ago. Ethan restored power to the warehouse. The main lights flickered back on. Everything looked normal again, like the past 6 hours had been a nightmare he'd imagined. When he came back, Victoria was still standing in the same spot. "Thank you," she said. Ethan wasn't sure he'd heard her correctly. For what? For caring. The word sat between them, strange and heavy. "I have a daughter," Ethan heard himself say. He wasn't sure why he was telling her this. "She's 8. If I lose this job..." He stopped, swallowed. "I can't lose this job." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked him more than anything else that had happened tonight. She smiled. It wasn't a big smile. Barely there, really, but it was real. "You're not going to lose your job," she said quietly. "Go home, Ethan Vale. Take care of your daughter." She walked past him toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed across the empty warehouse. At the door, she paused and looked back. "If this place collapses tonight," she said, "at least your daughter will know you died employed." She was quoting what he'd said earlier, but her voice had changed. The coldness was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like pain. Then she was gone. Ethan stood alone in the warehouse, bleeding and exhausted and completely confused. He didn't know it yet, but that conversation had just changed everything. 6 hours later, Ethan woke up on his couch with Lily sitting on his chest. "You're squishing me," he mumbled. "Good," Lily said cheerfully. "Mrs. Chen said you didn't come home until really late. Had to work. You always have to work." She wasn't wrong. Ethan forced his eyes open. Lily was wearing her favorite purple pajamas, the ones with the unicorns that were getting too small, but she refused to give up. Her dark hair was a mess. She had a gap where her front tooth used to be. She was perfect. "What time is it?" Ethan asked. "Almost noon." He sat up fast enough that Lily had to grab his shoulders to keep from falling. "Noon? Why didn't you wake me?" "Mrs. Chen said you looked tired." Ethan rubbed his face. His hand was throbbing where he'd cut it. He'd wrapped it in paper towels and duct tape before passing out. Probably should have gotten stitches. "Did you eat breakfast?" he asked. "Cereal. The good kind or the cheap kind?" "The cheap kind. We're out of the good kind." Guilt twisted in Ethan's stomach. He'd been promising to buy the cereal she actually liked for 2 weeks. "I'll get some today." "It's okay, Dad. The cheap kind isn't that bad." She said it in that careful, grown-up voice she used when she was trying to make him feel better. 8 years old and already learning to pretend things were fine when they weren't. Ethan pulled her into a hug. She smelled like syrup and shampoo. "I love you, kid." "Mommy, awesome. Well, love you too." She pulled back and poked his chest. "But you smell gross." "Yeah, I probably do." He got up and checked his phone. 3 missed calls, all from the same number. Not one he recognized. Before he could call back, the phone rang again. "Mr. Vale?" A woman's voice. Professional, crisp. "This is Jennifer Park from C-Tech HR, Ms. Sinclair would like to see you in her office tomorrow morning at 9. Ethan's blood went cold. "Did she say why?" "No, sir. Just to confirm you'll be there." Yeah, I'll be there." "Excellent. Please use the executive entrance on the 6th floor." She hung up before he could ask any more questions. Lily was watching him with worried eyes. "Who was that?" "Work," Ethan said automatically. "Are you in trouble?" "No, baby. Everything's fine." But as he said it, he realized he had no idea if that was true. He spent the rest of Sunday trying not to panic, played board games with Lily, made dinner from the random stuff left in the fridge, pasta with butter, and the last of the frozen peas, helped her with homework. The whole time, his mind kept circling back to Victoria Sinclair standing in the warehouse, watching him with those sharp eyes. I'm always watching. What did that mean? Why did the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company care about one warehouse worker fixing a server in the middle of the night? And why did she want to see him tomorrow? Ethan didn't sleep well that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the emergency lights and the smoke, and Victoria's face when she'd said, "At least your daughter will know you died employed," like it meant something, like she understood. Monday morning, Ethan dropped Lily off at school and drove to C-Tech headquarters. The building was downtown, all glass and steel and the kind of expensive architecture that made you feel small. He'd never been inside before. Warehouse workers didn't get invited to the main office. Security made him wait in the lobby for 15 minutes. He sat in a leather chair that was worth more than his truck and tried not to look as terrified as he felt. Finally, a young guy in a suit came down and escorted him to the 6th floor. The elevator was the kind that moved so smoothly you couldn't tell you were moving. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Ethan had never felt more out of place in his life. The 6th floor was all windows and white walls and plants that probably had people whose only job was to water them. Everyone. Ethan Past looked expensive and important, and like they'd never had to choose between rent and groceries. Victoria's office was at the end of a long hallway. The assistant outside, Jennifer, probably gestured for him to go in. Ethan knocked. "Come in." Victoria was sitting behind a desk made of dark wood that gleamed like water. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows showed the Seattle skyline. Rain was falling in sheets, turning the glass into a liquid blur. She looked different today, professional, untouchable. Her hair was pulled back in that same severe style. She wore a black suit that probably cost what Ethan made in 3 months. But when she looked up at him, her expression was the same as it had been in the warehouse. Sharp, careful, curious. "Sit down, Mr. Vale." Ethan sat in the chair across from her desk. His hands were sweating. He wiped them on his jeans, the same jeans from Saturday night, because they were the only ones that didn't have holes. Victoria studied him for a moment. Then she slid a folder across the desk. "I had someone pull your employment file," she said. Ethan's stomach dropped. He opened the folder. Inside was every piece of paperwork he'd ever signed for C-Tech. His job application from 3 years ago, performance reviews, timesheets, incident reports from the 2 times he'd had to leave early because Lily got sick at school. "Everything looks clean," Victoria said. "No write-ups, no complaints. Your supervisor says you're reliable and quiet. Never late. Never cause problems." Ethan didn't know what to say. "Okay, I said a spetsa. You're invisible," Victoria continued. "You've designed your entire life around being invisible." It felt like being punched. I looked into your situation," she said, cutting him off. "You're 2 months behind on rent. Your daughter has a chronic illness. You work 50-hour weeks and you still can barely make ends meet." Heat flooded Ethan's face. "That's private." "Nothing is private when I want to know about it." The words should have sounded arrogant. Instead, they just sounded tired. "Why are you telling me this?" Ethan asked. Victoria leaned back in her chair. For the first time since he'd walked in, she looked uncertain, like she was trying to figure out how to say something she'd never said before. "Because you shouldn't have been there Saturday night," she said finally. "You shouldn't have risked yourself for a company that doesn't even know your name. You should have let the system crash and gone home to your daughter." "I told you why I stayed." "I know, that's the problem." Ethan stared at her. "I don't understand." Victoria stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the rain for a long moment. 3 years ago, she said quietly, "I took over this company from my father. I was 27. Everyone said I was too young, too inexperienced, that I'd destroy everything he'd built." She paused. "They were right about one thing. I did destroy something. I destroyed the version of this company that treated employees like numbers. I fired executives who took bonuses while laying off warehouse workers. I restructured policies. I raised minimum wages." She turned to look at Ethan. "And you know what happened? Half the board tried to remove me. They said I was being emotional, that business couldn't be run on feelings." Her voice hardened. "So I stopped feeling. I made every decision like a machine, cold, efficient, ruthless, and it worked. The company grew. Stock prices went up. Everyone forgot I was a woman who was too young and too emotional because I wasn't acting like either anymore. Why are you telling me this? Ethan asked again. Because Saturday night, I watched you bleed to save other people's jobs, Victoria said. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt something. The silence that followed was heavy enough to hurt. I don't know what you want from me, Ethan said carefully. Victoria walked back to her desk, sat down. When she spoke again, her voice was back to being professional. I'm promoting you, she said, effective immediately. You'll be working in logistics coordination. It's a management track position. Better hours, better pay. You'll be able to afford your rent and your daughter's medication without working yourself to death. Ethan couldn't breathe. What? You heard me. I don't have a degree. I don't have experience. I can't. You taught yourself programming from YouTube videos and saved this company millions of dollars, Victoria interrupted. You understand systems better than people I'm paying 6 figures. You're smart and you care and you don't give up even when you should. She met his eyes. I need people like you. The company needs people like you. It was everything Ethan had dreamed about for 3 years. A way out of the warehouse, a chance to actually provide for Lily. Security. So why did it feel wrong? People are going to talk, he said slowly. Let them. They're going to say I slept with you or manipulated you or I don't care what they say, but I do. Ethan stood up. I've spent 3 years being invisible because it kept me safe. If you promote me like this, everyone's going to think I took advantage of you. Victoria's expression hardened. And what if you did? What? What if you did take advantage of me? She said coldly. What if you manipulated a lonely, overworked CEO into feeling sorry for you? Would that change anything? Would it make you less qualified? Less capable? That's not... The truth is, Mr. Vale, I don't know why I'm doing this. Maybe it's because I'm impressed by your work. Maybe it's because I want to prove to myself I'm still capable of trusting someone. Or maybe I'm just tired of being the villain in my own story. She stood up. But whatever the reason is, the offer stands. Take it or don't. Either way, your daughter deserves better than watching you kill yourself at a job that doesn't value you. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was making a mistake, that he wasn't special or talented or anything worth noticing. But then he thought about Lily asking if Santa was real, about the empty inhaler and the overdue rent and the look on Mrs. Chen's face when he apologized for coming home late again. Okay, he heard himself say. Victoria blinked. Okay, I'll take the job. Something shifted in her expression, not quite relief, something heavier. Good, she said quietly. She walked him to the door. As Ethan was leaving, she spoke again. Mr. Vale? He turned back. Thank you, Victoria said, for Saturday night, for reminding me why I started this in the first place. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and left. As he walked back through the expensive hallway with the expensive plants, his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Tell Lily I hope she feels better. Ethan stopped walking. How did Victoria know about Lily being sick? He pulled out his phone and started scrolling back through his employment file, the one she'd shown him. There, buried in an incident report from 6 months ago, was a note he'd written explaining why he'd had to leave early. Daughter experiencing asthma attack, left at 2 p.m. to take her to urgent care. Victoria had read that, had remembered it, had somehow connected it to the conversation they'd had Saturday night. I'm always watching. For the first time, Ethan wondered if maybe Victoria Sinclair wasn't as cold as everyone thought. Maybe she was just as scared as he was. The rumors started before Ethan even made it to his new desk. He walked into the logistics office on Tuesday morning carrying a cardboard box with his coffee mug and the framed photo of Lily he kept at the warehouse. The space was different up here, quieter, cleaner, with carpet instead of concrete and windows that actually let in light. People sat at computers instead of operating forklifts. They wore button-down shirts instead of high-visibility vests. Ethan felt like an imposter in borrowed clothes. He'd bought the khakis and polo shirt at a discount store Sunday night, spending money he didn't have because showing up in his warehouse uniform felt wrong. The shirt was already too tight across the shoulders. The pants were half an inch too short. But it was the best he could do. A woman in her 40s with severe glasses looked up from her desk as he walked past. Her eyes traveled from his face to his box to his cheap shoes and back again. She didn't say anything. Didn't have to. Her expression said it all. Ethan found his desk in the corner. Someone had left a welcome packet and a sticky note that read, "Orientation at 10, Jennifer." He sat down in the chair and it squeaked loudly enough that 3 people looked over. He wanted to disappear into the floor. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Lily asking if you can pick her up from school today. I have doctor appointment at 3. Ethan checked the time. It was 8:30. He had no idea what his new schedule looked like, or if he was even allowed to leave early anymore. At the warehouse, he'd had flexibility because nobody cared as long as the work got done. But here, he texted back, "I'll figure it out. Thanks, Mrs. Chen." "So, you're the guy." Ethan looked up. A man in his 30s stood next to his desk, arms crossed. He had the kind of face that looked friendly until you noticed his eyes weren't smiling. "Sorry?" Ethan said. "The guy who got promoted out of nowhere. Everyone's talking about it." The man glanced at the empty desks around them, then lowered his voice. "Must be nice having friends in high places." Craig spent 5 years working his way up from the warehouse. You know what position he's in now? Same one he started in. But you? 3 years and suddenly you're management track. The man shook his head. "That's impressive." The word came out like an insult. "I just do my job," Ethan said carefully. "Right, your job." The man smiled without warmth. "I'm Marcus. By the way, we'll be working together, looking forward to it." He walked away before Ethan could respond. The morning got worse from there. Orientation was 2 hours of HR, paperwork, and safety videos that didn't apply to anything Ethan would actually be doing. Jennifer from HR spoke in the same crisp, professional tone she'd used on the phone, never quite making eye contact. She handed him an employee handbook, a badge that would give him access to restricted floors, and a benefits package that made his chest tight because it included dental insurance and paid sick days, and things he'd stopped believing were real. "Any questions?" Jennifer asked. "About 1,000. "No, ma'am." "Great. Your supervisor is Daniel Park. He'll go over your responsibilities this afternoon." She paused. "Ms. Sinclair has asked to be kept updated on your progress. Weekly reports." Ethan's stomach dropped. "She wants reports on me?" Standard procedure for new management track positions. It didn't feel standard. It felt like being watched, like Victoria had put a spotlight on him that he couldn't turn off. When he got back to his desk, someone had left a printout on his keyboard. It was an article from the company newsletter about Victoria, one of those puff pieces about female CEOs breaking barriers. Someone had circled a quote, "I don't believe in giving handouts. Everyone here earns their position." Below it, in red pen, guess that changed. Ethan crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. By lunch, he'd heard 3 different versions of how he'd gotten promoted. One involved him blackmailing Victoria with information about the server crash. Another suggested he was secretly related to someone on the board. The third was cruder and made him want to punch something. He ate a sandwich from the vending machine in his truck, staring at the rain and wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake accepting this job. His phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Vale, it's Victoria Sinclair." Ethan sat up straight like she could see him through the phone. "Miss Sinclair, Hello. How's your first day going?" He almost laughed. "It's going. I heard Marcus gave you a warm welcome." Of course she'd heard. She heard everything. "He was just being friendly." "He was being an asshole." Victoria's voice was flat. "Marcus has been angling for a promotion for 2 years. He's competent but lazy. Resents anyone who gets what he thinks he deserves." "How do you know all this?" "I told you. I'm always watching." She paused. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," Ethan lied. "You're a terrible liar, Mr. Vale." This time he did laugh, though it came out shaky. "Maybe a little." "Good. That means you're smart." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I'm not going to tell you it gets easier. The people here are going to make assumptions about you. Some will be jealous. Some will try to undermine you. And some will wait for you to fail so they can say, I made a mistake. That's not helping. I'm not trying to help. I'm trying to prepare you. Her voice softened slightly. But I will tell you this. I didn't promote you because I felt sorry for you. I promoted you because you're good at what you do. Whether you believe that or not is up to you. Ethan stared out the windshield at the gray Seattle sky. Why do you care? The question hung between them. He could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I don't know, Victoria said finally. Maybe I'm tired of being surrounded by people who only tell me what I want to hear. Or maybe I'm just curious to see what happens when someone actually gives a damn. She paused. Pick up your daughter from school. I'll clear it with Daniel. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan sat in his truck for another 10 minutes, trying to figure out what had just happened. Every conversation with Victoria Sinclair felt like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. She was cold and blunt and invasive. She knew things about his life she had no business knowing, but she'd also just given him permission to be a father in the middle of the workday. He didn't know what to do with that. At 2:45, Ethan left the office. A few people watched him go. He could feel their eyes on his back, could imagine the conversations that would start the second he was gone. But when he pulled up to Lily's school and saw her waiting on the steps with her purple backpack, none of it mattered. She climbed into the truck and immediately started talking about her day. Something about a boy named Trevor who'd brought a snake for show and tell, and how her teacher had screamed. Ethan listened and made the right noises and felt the knot in his chest loosen just slightly. Dad? Lily said as they pulled into their apartment complex. Yeah, baby. Did something good happen? Ethan glanced at her. What makes you ask? You seem different, less tired. She said it so simply, like it was obvious. Like she'd been keeping track of exactly how tired he looked every day and had finally noticed a change. Maybe something good did happen, Ethan said carefully. I got a new job at work, better hours, better pay. Lily's face lit up. Does that mean we can get the good cereal now? Ethan laughed. It felt good. Yeah, kid, we can get the good cereal. That night, he took her to the grocery store and let her pick out whatever she wanted. She chose the expensive brand with the cartoon character on the box, plus strawberries because they were her favorite, and ice cream because Ethan didn't have it in him to say no. At the register, he used his debit card without checking his account balance first. It went through. The relief was so intense it made him dizzy. On the way home, Lily fell asleep in the passenger seat, hugging the cereal box like a stuffed animal. Ethan carried her upstairs, tucked her into bed, and sat on the edge of her mattress, watching her breathe. For the first time in 3 years, he let himself believe things might actually get better. He was wrong. The next morning, Ethan arrived at work to find his new supervisor, Daniel Park, waiting at his desk. Daniel was maybe 40, Korean-American, with the kind of permanent stress lines that came from middle management. He didn't look happy. We need to talk, Daniel said. They went to a conference room. Daniel closed the door and sat down across from Ethan with a folder that looked suspiciously official. I'm going to be direct with you, Daniel said. I don't like this situation. Ethan's guard went up. What situation? You getting promoted over my objections. Miss Sinclair made it very clear that you were being moved to my team whether I agreed or not. Daniel opened the folder. Your employment record shows 0 management experience, no college degree, no certifications. You've spent 3 years moving boxes in a warehouse. I also fixed a system failure that would have cost the company millions. One time. You did it one time. Daniel leaned forward. Do you know how many qualified candidates I've interviewed in the past year? People with degrees and experience who would kill for this position, and I'm supposed to train you instead because the CEO has a soft spot. The words hit harder than Ethan expected. I didn't ask for this. But you took it. Daniel sat back. Look, I don't know what your relationship is with Ms. Sinclair, and honestly, I don't care. What I care about is my team. I've spent 5 years building a department that runs like clockwork. I'm not going to let it fall apart because of nepotism or favoritism or whatever this is. So what are you saying? I'm saying you're on probation, unofficial but real. You make mistakes, I document them. You miss deadlines, I document them. You give me any reason to prove that Ms. Sinclair made a bad call, and I will. Daniel's expression didn't change. Nothing personal, just business. It felt extremely personal. Ethan spent the rest of the week trying to prove himself to a man who'd already decided he would fail. Daniel gave him assignments designed to be confusing, dense reports to analyze, system workflows to optimize, logistics problems that required knowledge Ethan didn't have yet. Every time he asked for clarification, Daniel's expression said what his words didn't. You should already know this. By Friday, Ethan was staying late every night, taking work home, studying company procedures after Lily went to bed. His hand still ached where he'd cut it. His knee was getting worse. He was running on 4 hours of sleep and gas station coffee and the stubborn refusal to give Daniel the satisfaction of watching him quit. But it was taking a toll. Friday afternoon, Lily's school called. She was in the nurse's office having trouble breathing. Her inhaler wasn't helping. Ethan's blood went cold. He grabbed his jacket and ran for the door. Marcus looked up from his desk. Leaving early again? Family emergency. Right. Must be nice having that flexibility. Ethan didn't have time to argue. He drove to the school going 15 over the speed limit, his heart pounding. When he got there, Lily was sitting in the nurse's office with an oxygen mask on her face, looking small and scared. Hey, baby, Ethan said, kneeling in front of her. You okay? She nodded, but her breathing was still labored. The nurse pulled him aside. She had an episode during PE. Her rescue inhaler didn't bring her levels up enough. I gave her a nebulizer treatment, but I think she needs to see her doctor. Okay, yeah, I'll take her now. Mr. Vale? The nurse hesitated. I noticed her prescription is for a different medication than what she's been using. Did something change? Which was. Ethan felt his face heat up. The other one was too expensive. The doctor said this generic would work just as well. The nurse's expression said everything she was too professional to say out loud. You might want to discuss that with him again. The urgent care visit cost $200, even with the new insurance that hadn't kicked in yet. The doctor confirmed what Ethan already knew. The generic medication wasn't strong enough for Lily's condition. She needed the name brand, $400 a month. With the new salary, he could almost afford it. Almost. Ethan drove home with Lily sleeping in the passenger seat and did math in his head. Rent, utilities, groceries, medication, truck payment, the credit card he'd maxed out last winter when the heat broke. The new salary helped, but it didn't fix everything. He was still one emergency away from disaster. His phone buzzed with an email. The subject line made his stomach drop. Performance review. Week 1. He waited until after he'd gotten Lily settled at home to read it. The email was from Daniel, copied to Victoria and HR. Ethan completed assigned tasks but required excessive guidance and supervision. Missed several deadlines, demonstrated gaps in fundamental knowledge expected at this level. Recommend additional training or reconsideration of placement. Ethan read it 3 times. Each time felt like being punched. He'd worked 70 hours this week. Had taken work home every night. Had asked questions because he was trying to learn, not because he was incompetent. And Daniel had documented every stumble like evidence for a case he was building. Ethan's phone rang. Victoria. He almost didn't answer. But something made him pick up. I read Daniel's email, Victoria said without preamble. Yeah, me too. It's bullshit. The bluntness startled him. He's not wrong. I don't have the background for this. I'm in over my head. You're 1 week in and he's already trying to bury you. Victoria's voice was hard. He did the same thing to the last person I promoted over his objections. Gave her impossible assignments, documented every mistake, made her feel incompetent until she quit. Why didn't you fire him? Because he's good at his job when he's not being territorial. And because firing someone for being an asshole would mean I'd have to fire half the company. She paused. I'm not going to let him push you out. Maybe he's right. Maybe I can't do this. Do you believe that? Ethan thought about the server room. About teaching himself to code from YouTube videos during lunch breaks. About staying up all night to fix a problem no one had asked him to solve because it was the right thing to do. No, he said quietly. But belief doesn't pay for my daughter's medication. What happened? He told her about the urgent care visit, about the generic medication not working, about doing math in the parking lot and realizing the new salary still wasn't enough. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. The company's healthcare plan covers specialty medications at 80% after deductible, she said finally. Your insurance kicks in next Monday. File the claim through HR. It should bring the cost down to under $100 a month. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. I didn't know that. Most people don't. The benefit structure is deliberately complicated. Us. Her voice softened slightly. How is Lily? Scared. She doesn't understand why the medicine stopped working. Kids shouldn't have to understand things like that. There was something in Victoria's voice that made Ethan pause. Not pity. Something older. Something that sounded like memory. Do you have kids? He asked before he could stop himself. No. The word came out clipped. I have a company that requires 90 hours a week and a family that thinks I sold my soul for it. Children don't fit into that equation. Sounds lonely. It is. The admission hung between them. Ethan had never heard Victoria sound vulnerable before. It didn't fit with the cold, calculating CEO everyone else saw. Why are you really helping me? He asked. Victoria was quiet for so long he thought she might have hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because 3 years ago, I fired 200 people to save this company. I stood in front of them and explained that their jobs were being eliminated for efficiency purposes. Most of them had families, kids, mortgages. She paused. One man asked me if I understood what I was doing to them. I told him I was doing what was necessary. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. Victoria's voice hardened again. I made the right decision. The company survived. But I've spent 3 years wondering if making the right decision cost me something I can't get back. And then I met you. I don't understand. You risked everything for people you didn't know because it was the right thing to do. Not the profitable thing. Not the strategic thing. The right thing. She laughed, but it sounded bitter. I'd forgotten there was a difference. Ethan didn't know what to say. He'd spent a week feeling like an imposter who'd manipulated his way into a job he didn't deserve. But Victoria made it sound like she was the one trying to prove something. I'm not special, he said finally. No, you're just decent, which is somehow rarer. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan sat on his couch staring at his phone, trying to make sense of the conversation. Every time he thought he understood Victoria Sinclair, she said something that made him question everything. The next morning was Saturday. Ethan took Lily to the park, even though the weather was cold and threatening rain. She wanted to play on the swings, and he wasn't going to tell her no. They'd brought the good cereal and strawberries for a picnic, and for an hour they pretended everything was normal and fine. Lily was telling him about a book she was reading when someone sat down on the bench next to them. Victoria Sinclair, wearing jeans and a sweater that looked soft and expensive, holding a coffee cup from the place across the street. Ethan stared. What are you doing here? I live 2 blocks away. Victoria nodded toward Lily on the swings. Is that her? How did you? Ethan stopped. Of course she knew. She always knew. You followed me. I was getting coffee and saw your truck in the parking lot. She didn't sound apologetic. I wanted to check on her. You could have called. I could have. Victoria took a sip of her coffee. But I wanted to see her. Lily noticed them talking and came running over. She stopped when she saw Victoria, suddenly shy. Lily, this is Ms. Sinclair. She's my boss. Ethan looked at Victoria. This is my daughter. Hi, Lily said quietly. Victoria's entire demeanor changed. The coldness disappeared, replaced by something softer. Hi, Lily. Your dad talks about you a lot. He does? All the time. He's very proud of you. Lily glanced at Ethan, then back at Victoria. Are you the reason Dad got the new job? Victoria's lips twitched. Maybe. Is that okay? Yeah, he's been happier, and we got the good cereal now. Well, the good cereal is important, Victoria said seriously. Lily giggled. Then, because she was 8 and had no filter, she asked, Why are you so pretty? Lily! Ethan's face burned. But Victoria smiled, a real smile. Not the careful, controlled expression she wore at work, but something genuine. Thank you. You're very pretty too. My dad says I look like my mom. Lily's voice got quieter. She died when I was little. The air changed. Ethan saw Victoria's expression shift, saw something like pain flash across her face. I'm sorry, Victoria said softly. That must be hard. Lily shrugged in that way kids do when they're trying to act braver than they feel. It's okay. Dad takes good care of me. I can see that. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Lily asked if she could go back to the swings, and Ethan nodded. He watched her run across the playground, her purple jacket bright against the gray sky. You didn't tell me her mother died, Victoria said. You didn't ask. I should have. She was quiet for a moment. What happened? Ethan didn't talk about Sarah. Not with coworkers or neighbors or anyone who didn't need to know. But sitting there with Victoria, who'd somehow become more than just his boss without him noticing, the words came easier. Car accident. Lily was 6 months old. Sarah was driving home from her sister's place and someone ran a red light. He stared at his hands. She died in the hospital 3 days later. Never woke up. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Doesn't change anything, Seg. Victoria was quiet. Then, my mother died when I was 12. Cancer, took 2 years. Ethan looked at her, surprised. I didn't know. Why would you? It's not exactly in my biography. Victoria watched Lily on the swings. My father buried himself in work, built the company into an empire because focusing on quarterly reports was easier than focusing on the fact that she was gone. I learned early that feelings were something you locked away, that showing weakness was the same as failing. That's a terrible thing to teach a kid. Yes, it was. Victoria's voice was flat. But it made me effective, cold, successful, everything he wanted. What about what you wanted? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She looked at him with those sharp eyes, and for a second Ethan saw past the CEO to the 12-year-old girl who'd lost her mother. I wanted to matter, Victoria said quietly. I wanted to prove I was worth something beyond being his daughter. That I could be more than just the girl who wasn't strong enough to save her mother. You can't save people from cancer. I know that now, but when you're 12? She shook her head. Logic doesn't apply. They sat in silence, watching Lily play. The park was mostly empty, too cold for most families. But Lily didn't care. She was laughing, pushing herself higher on the swings, her hair flying. She's lucky to have you, Victoria said. I'm the lucky one. Victoria glanced at him. You really believe that? Of course I do. She's my kid. Not everyone feels that way. Some people see children as obligations, burdens. Victoria's voice was careful. My father used to tell me that children were investments. That love was secondary to producing results. Your father sounds like an asshole. Victoria laughed. It was sudden and genuine, and it changed her entire face. He absolutely was. But he built a billion-dollar company, so everyone called it genius instead of cruelty. What do you call it? Moshiti. Both. She finished her coffee. He taught me everything I know about business, and nothing about being human. Ethan wanted to ask more, but Lily came running back, breathless and grinning. Dad, can we get hot chocolate? Sure, baby. Can Miss Sinclair come? Ethan and Victoria looked at each other. He could see her calculating, weighing the professional implications of getting hot chocolate with an employee and his daughter on a Saturday morning. I'd like that, Victoria said. They went to a small cafe near the park. Lily ordered the kind with extra whipped cream and chocolate sprinkles. Victoria got plain black coffee. Ethan got the cheapest thing on the menu and pretended he wasn't doing math about whether this would mess up his grocery budget. Lily talked the entire time, telling Victoria about school and her friends and the book she was reading about dragons. Victoria listened with the same focused attention she probably gave to board meetings. She asked questions. Made Lily laugh. At one point, she helped Lily with a word search puzzle on the kids' menu. Ethan watched them together and felt something strange in his chest. Not quite hope, but close. When they left the cafe, Lily hugged Victoria goodbye. Just walked up and wrapped her arms around her without asking permission. Victoria froze for a second, like she'd forgotten how hugs worked. Then she carefully put her arms around Lily and held on. "Thank you for the hot chocolate," Lily said. "You're welcome." Victoria's voice was softer than Ethan had ever heard it. Victoria's voice was... In the truck driving home, Lily said, "I like her." "Yeah?" "She seems sad, though, like she's pretending not to be." Ethan glanced at his daughter. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart, Dad. You just don't always notice." That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan got a text from Victoria. "Thank you for letting me join you today. I can't remember the last time I did something normal." He stared at the message for a long time before replying. "You're welcome. Lily really liked you. She's a special kid." "I know." There was a pause. Then another message came through. "Monday is going to be difficult. Daniel is presenting his evaluation to the department heads. He's going to recommend your termination." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What?" "I'm telling you because you deserve to know. And because I'm going to fight it." "Why?" "Everyone thinks I don't deserve this job anyway." "Maybe they're right." The response came immediately. "They're not, and I don't lose fights." Ethan sat on his couch staring at his phone, caught between terror and something that might have been faith. Monday morning felt like walking to an execution. Ethan arrived at the office 45 minutes early. The building was almost empty, just security and a few ambitious executives who thought being first proved something. He made coffee in the break room with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, then sat at his desk staring at the screen without seeing it. The evaluation meeting was scheduled for 10. Daniel had sent a calendar invite Friday afternoon with no details, just a subject line that read, "Performance Review, Eval." Victoria was listed as required. So was Margaret Chen from HR and 2 department heads Ethan had never met. It felt less like a review and more like a tribunal. At 8:30, Marcus showed up. He made a show of looking surprised to see Ethan there. "Wow, didn't expect you to come in today." "Ooh, see." Ethan didn't look up from his screen. "Why wouldn't I?" "I don't know, man. If I had a meeting like yours, I'd probably be updating my resume." Marcus sat down at his desk. "No offense." None taken." "For what it's worth, I think Daniel's being too hard on you. You seem like a nice guy." Marcus opened his laptop. "But this job isn't really about being nice. It's about results. And from what I hear, you haven't delivered any." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I've been here 2 weeks." "Whoa." "Some people hit the ground running. Others just hit the ground." Marcus shrugged. "Not everyone's cut out for management. Nothing wrong with going back to the warehouse." "I'm not going back to the warehouse." "We'll see." The next 90 minutes were torture. Ethan tried to work but couldn't focus. Every email felt meaningless. Every task felt pointless. He kept checking the clock, watching the minutes crawl toward 10. At 9:45, his phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Conference room, B, 5 minutes. Come alone." Ethan stood up. His legs felt unsteady. "Good luck," Marcus called after him, not sounding like he meant it. Conference room B was on the 6th floor, down the hall from Victoria's office. When Ethan walked in, she was already there, standing by the window, looking out at the city. She wore a dark suit that probably cost more than his truck. Her hair was pulled back so tight, it looked painful. She turned when he entered. Her expression was unreadable. "Close the door," Victoria said. Ethan did. The click of the latch sounded too loud. "I need you to understand what's about to happen," Victoria said without preamble. "Daniel is going to present his evaluation. He's documented every mistake you've made, every question you've asked, every deadline you've missed. He's going to recommend termination with cause, which means you won't qualify for severance or unemployment." Ethan's throat went dry. "Okay." "The department heads will support him because they don't know you and they trust Daniel's judgment. Margaret from HR will stay neutral because that's her job. And I'm going to override all of them. You can do that?" I'm the CEO. I can do whatever I want." Victoria's voice was flat. "But it will have consequences. Daniel will feel undermined. The department heads will question my judgment. People will say I'm showing favoritism, that I'm emotional, that I'm making decisions based on personal feelings instead of business logic. Then don't do it. I'm not worth that." Victoria's eyes flashed. Don't tell me what you're worth. The words came out sharp enough to cut. Ethan took a step back. I've spent 3 years proving I can make hard decisions, Victoria continued. I fired people who deserved it and people who didn't. I've cut entire departments to save the company. I've made choices that kept me up at night because they were necessary. She paused. But I'm not going to fire you to make Daniel Park feel better about his insecurities. He's not wrong, though. I don't have the experience for this job. I'm learning as I go and making mistakes, and everyone makes mistakes their first month. The difference is most people don't have their supervisor documenting each one like evidence for a trial. Victoria walked closer. Daniel is threatened by you. Not because you're incompetent, but because you were chosen by me over his objections. He's trying to prove I was wrong, and I refuse to let him. Why? Because I wasn't wrong. Victoria's voice softened slightly. You saved this company millions of dollars with YouTube tutorials and stubbornness. You work harder than anyone I've ever met. You care about people in a way that's rare in this industry. Those things matter. Experience can be taught. Integrity can't. Ethan wanted to believe her. Ethan wanted to, but belief felt dangerous when his daughter's future was on the line. What if you're right about me and I still fail? He asked quietly. Then you fail. But you'll fail honestly, not because someone sabotaged you from the start. Victoria checked her watch. We have 5 minutes. I need to know you're going to fight. I don't know how to fight people like Daniel. You don't have to. That's what I'm for. She met his eyes. But I need you to walk into that meeting and act like you deserve to be there. Even if you don't believe it yet, said. Ethan thought about Lily, about the good cereal and the medication he could almost afford, about Saturday morning in the park when his daughter had hugged a woman who'd forgotten how to be hugged. Okay, he said. Victoria nodded once. Then she did something that surprised him. She reached out and straightened his collar, her fingers careful and impersonal. You have a coffee stain on your shirt, she said. Ethan looked down. He did. Right on the front. Sorry. Don't apologize. Just don't let them see you sweat. She pulled her hand back. And Ethan? When Daniel starts talking, don't react. Don't defend yourself. Let me handle it. Why? Because if you try to defend yourself, you'll sound desperate. But if you stay calm and let me do the talking, you'll sound confident. Victoria's expression hardened. And confidence is the only language these men understand. They walked to the conference room together. The others were already there. Daniel sat at the head of the table with a stack of papers in front of him. Margaret from HR was to his right, her expression professionally neutral. The two department heads, Robert Chang and Susan Martinez, sat across from each other looking vaguely impatient. Victoria took the seat at the opposite end of the table from Daniel. Ethan sat next to her, feeling like he was about to be fed to wolves. Let's get started, Daniel said. Thank you all for making time. I know this is unusual, but given the circumstances, I felt it was necessary to address Mr. Vale's performance before it becomes a larger issue. What circumstances? Victoria asked coolly. Daniel glanced at her. His inability to meet the basic requirements of his position. Define basic requirements. Completing assignments without excessive supervision. Meeting deadlines. Demonstrating foundational knowledge of logistics management. Daniel opened his folder. Over the past 2 weeks, Mr. Vale has required an average of 4 hours per day of direct supervision. He's missed 3 deadlines, all of which required other team members to cover his work. And his understanding of core processes is below entry level. Robert Chang leaned forward. What's his background again? 3 years in the warehouse, Daniel said. No management experience, no degree, no relevant certifications. Susan Martinez frowned. Then why was he promoted to management track? Everyone looked at Victoria. She didn't blink. Because he prevented a system failure that would have cost this company $8 million in delayed shipments. He did it alone, in the middle of the night, using skills he taught himself. And he did it without being asked or compensated. That's very admirable, Susan said carefully. But technical skills don't always translate to management capability. I agree. Which is why I expected his supervisor to train him, not set him up to fail. Daniel's expression tightened. I've treated Mr. Vale exactly like any other new hire. Have you? Victoria's voice was sharp. Because I pulled the onboarding records for the last 5 people who joined your team. They all received 2 weeks of shadowing before being assigned independent projects. Mr. Vale received 1 day before you started documenting his mistakes. Daniel's face flushed. Those employees had relevant experience. Jason Trent had a business degree and 3 months at a logistics startup. That's hardly extensive. Victoria didn't raise her voice, but the temperature in the room dropped anyway. You gave him 3 weeks of training. You gave Ethan 1 day. Why? Because I was told this was a priority hire who needed to prove himself quickly. Told by whom? Daniel hesitated. By you, in the email informing me of his transfer. Victoria pulled out her phone and scrolled for a moment. Then she read aloud, Daniel, effective immediately, Ethan Vale will be joining your team as logistics coordinator. Please provide standard onboarding and training. He has demonstrated strong technical aptitude and problem-solving skills. Looking forward to seeing his growth. Victoria Sinclair. She looked up. Where in that email did I say anything about proving himself quickly? The silence was uncomfortable. I may have misinterpreted, Daniel said stiffly. You may have decided to prove a point, Victoria corrected. You disagreed with my decision to promote him, so you created conditions designed to make him fail. That's not management. That's sabotage. Robert shifted in his seat. Those are serious accusations. They're observations, supported by data. Victoria nodded at Margaret. How many performance reviews has Daniel submitted in the past year? Margaret checked her tablet. 12. How many recommended termination? 1, Mr. Vale's. And of the other 11, how many employees required additional training or supervision in their first month? Margaret scrolled through her records. 8 reported needing moderate to significant support during initial onboarding, yet none of them were recommended for termination. Victoria looked at Daniel. Why is Mr. Vale different? Daniel's jaw worked. He's not different. The circumstances are that you didn't want him on your team, and you've spent 2 weeks building a case to get rid of him. Victoria's voice cut through the room like ice. I promoted Ethan because he earned it. You're trying to fire him because your ego can't handle being overruled. That's not fair, Daniel said. Neither is sabotaging an employee's career because you disagree with mine. Susan cleared her throat. Ms. Sinclair, I understand you have confidence in Mr. Vale, but Daniel raises valid concerns about preparedness. Perhaps a different placement would be more appropriate? You mean send him back to the warehouse? Or a different department with less demanding requirements? Well, but he doesn't need a different department. He needs a supervisor who's actually interested in developing him. Victoria's gaze swept the room. I'm removing Mr. Vale from Daniel's team effective immediately. He'll report directly to me for the next 6 weeks while we implement a proper training program. The room erupted. That's was. Robert and Susan started talking at once, their voices overlapping. Margaret's expression remained carefully neutral, but her eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. Daniel looked like he'd been slapped. You can't be serious, Daniel said. I'm completely serious. This sets a terrible precedent. You can't personally supervise every employee who struggles. I'm not supervising every employee. I'm supervising one employee who has been deliberately set up to fail by his supervisor. Victoria stood up. This meeting is over. Margaret, please draft the paperwork for Ethan's transfer. Daniel, we'll discuss your management approach in a separate meeting. She walked out without waiting for a response. Ethan sat frozen, his heart pounding. Everyone was staring at him. Robert looked angry. Susan looked confused. Margaret looked like she was already calculating the HR implications. And Daniel looked like he wanted to throw something. Congratulations, so Daniel said coldly. You just became the CEO's pet project. Let's see how long that lasts. Ethan stood up on shaky legs and left the room. He found Victoria in her office, standing at the window again. She didn't turn around when he entered. That was, Ethan started. Necessary, Victoria finished. Close the door. He did. Then he just stood there, not knowing what to say. I meant what I said, Victoria said quietly. You'll report to me for the next 6 weeks. We'll work on management fundamentals, system architecture, logistics theory. Everything Daniel should have taught you, but didn't. People are going to say, I don't care what people say. Victoria finally turned around. Her expression was hard, but her eyes were tired. Let them talk. Let them make assumptions. None of it changes the fact that you deserve a fair chance. Why are you doing this? Because someone should have done it for me. The words came out before she could stop them. Victoria's expression flickered like she'd revealed something she hadn't meant to. Ethan stepped closer. What does that mean? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked to her desk and sat down, suddenly looking exhausted. When I took over this company, I was 27 years old and everyone expected me to fail, she said. The board appointed me because my father's will required it, but they spent my first year trying to undermine every decision I made. They gave me impossible projects, documented every mistake, made me feel incompetent. She paused. One of them told me I should step down gracefully before I destroyed my father's legacy, that I was too emotional to run a company, too soft. What did you do? I stopped being soft. I stopped showing emotion. I fired anyone who questioned me and made decisions so ruthless that no one dared call me weak again. Victoria's voice was flat. I won, but I lost something in the process. I became exactly what they accused me of being, cold, calculating, alone. Ethan sat down across from her. You're not alone. Aren't I? Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I have employees who fear me, board members who tolerate me, and a father who died disappointed that I wasn't the son he wanted. The only person who's been genuinely kind to me in 3 years is an 8-year-old girl who doesn't know she's supposed to be intimidated. Lily likes you because you were kind to her, not because she doesn't know better. I wasn't kind. I bought her hot chocolate. You listened to her. You made her feel important. That's kindness. Victoria looked at him like he'd said something in a language she didn't speak. How do you do that? Do what? See things so simply, like the world isn't complicated. The world is complicated, Ethan said, but people aren't. They just want to feel like they matter, that someone notices them. Is that what you want? The question hung between them. Ethan thought about the warehouse, about being invisible for 3 years, about working himself to exhaustion for a company that barely knew his name. Yeah, he said quietly. I guess it is. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. Something Ethan couldn't quite read. You start tomorrow, she said finally. 8 a.m. We'll begin with supply chain fundamentals and work our way up to strategic planning. I expect you to be on time, prepared, and willing to learn. I will. Good. She pulled a file toward her. You can go. Ethan stood to leave. At the door, he paused. Thank you for what you did in there. Don't thank me yet. I just made your life significantly more complicated. Victoria didn't look up from her papers. Everyone in this building now thinks you're sleeping with me. Your coworkers will resent you even more. And if you fail, it will reflect poorly on both of us. I won't fail. See that you don't. It was a dismissal, but when Ethan glanced back, he caught Victoria watching him with an expression he'd seen before. In the warehouse that first night, at the park on Saturday, like she was trying to figure out a puzzle she couldn't solve. The rest of the day was exactly as bad as Victoria had predicted. The news spread through the office within an hour. By lunch, Ethan had heard at least 5 different versions of why he was now reporting directly to the CEO. Most of them involved sex. Some involved blackmail. One particularly creative theory suggested he was secretly related to someone on the board. Marcus didn't even pretend to be subtle about it. So you're the boss's special project now, he said, walking past Ethan's desk. Must be nice having someone fight your battles for you. Ethan didn't respond. I mean, most of us have to actually prove ourselves. But I guess some people take shortcuts. You want to say something to my face? Ethan asked quietly. Marcus stopped, turned around. I'm just making an observation. You've been here 2 weeks and you're already getting private training from the CEO. That's not normal. People notice. Let them notice. Careful, man. When you climb this fast, the fall's usually harder. Marcus smiled. Just looking out for you. He walked away before Ethan could respond. At 3 o'clock, Ethan's phone buzzed. The school, again. His stomach dropped as he answered. Hello? Mr. Vale, this is Principal Morrison. Lily's fine, but we need you to come pick her up. What happened? She got into an altercation with another student. No one was hurt, but our policy requires parental pickup when... I'll be right there. Ethan grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. He'd made it halfway across the office when Jennifer from HR intercepted him. Mr. Vale, where are you going? Family emergency. I'll be back. You need to log it in the system first. Fill out the early departure form. My daughter's at school waiting for me. I'll fill out the form when I get back. Jennifer's expression tightened. Company policy requires... Jennifer! Victoria's voice cut across the office. She was standing in the doorway of a conference room, arms crossed. Let him go. Jennifer looked between them, then stepped aside. Ethan drove to the school 20 miles over the speed limit, his mind racing. Lily never got in trouble. She was quiet and careful and went out of her way to avoid conflict. When he got to the principal's office, Lily was sitting in a chair with her arms crossed, looking furious. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. Baby, what happened? Trevor said you were a janitor, Lily said, her voice shaking. He said his dad said you clean toilets, and that's why we're poor. So I pushed him. Ethan's heart broke. Oh, Lily. It's not true, right? You're not a janitor? No, baby. I work in logistics. I help manage shipping routes. Then why did Trevor's dad say that? Because people are cruel, Ethan thought. Because a second grader's father had apparently been gossiping about the new guy at work, and it had filtered down to their kids. Because even 8-year-olds absorb the poison of adult judgment. Some people say things that aren't true, Ethan said carefully. It doesn't matter what Trevor's dad thinks. But everyone was laughing at me. Principal Morrison cleared his throat. Mr. Vale, Lily violated our zero-tolerance policy on physical altercations. I'm suspending her for the rest of the day. She can return tomorrow, but another incident will result in a longer suspension. She's 8 and she was defending herself. She pushed another student. Regardless of provocation, that's unacceptable. Ethan wanted to argue. Wanted to tell the principal that maybe they should address why a parent was teaching his kid to make fun of classmates' financial situations. But fighting wouldn't help Lily. Understood, he said tightly. It won't happen again. He signed the paperwork and took Lily to the truck. She cried the whole way home, big gulping sobs that made her breathing sound wrong. I hate this, she said between gasps. I hate that we're different. I hate that people think you're not important. Hey. Ethan pulled over, turned to face her. Listen to me. I am important. Not because of my job or how much money I make. I'm important because I'm your dad, and I love you more than anything in this world. Do you understand? But Trevor's dad has a big house and a nice car, and I have you, which means I'm richer than Trevor's dad will ever be. It was the kind of thing adults said to make kids feel better. But Lily was 8, not stupid. She could see through platitudes. Can we just go home? She asked quietly. They went home. Ethan made her favorite dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, and they watched a movie together, but Lily stayed quiet, withdrawn in a way that scared him. At bedtime, she asked, Dad, are we going to be okay? Ethan tucked the blanket around her. Yes, baby. We're going to be okay. Promise? Promise. He sat with her until she fell asleep, then went to the living room and sat in the dark trying not to fall apart. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Is Lily all right? Ethan stared at the message. He shouldn't have been surprised she knew. She knew everything. But somehow her knowing about this felt different, more invasive, more personal. She got suspended. Kid at school said some things about me. She defended me. What things? Does it matter? Yes. Ethan typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on the truth. His dad works at C-Tech. Apparently he's been talking about me at home. The kid repeated it at school, and the other kids laughed at Lily. The response came immediately. What's the father's name? I don't know. Victoria, don't find out. Why? Because no one gets to hurt your daughter. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her to leave it alone, that making a scene would only make things worse. But part of him, the part that had spent the afternoon watching his child cry, wanted someone to care as much as Victoria apparently did. How did you know something happened? Jennifer mentioned you left for a family emergency. I checked with the school. You called Lily's school? I wanted to make sure she was okay. Ethan didn't know what to do with that. With the fact that his boss had taken time out of her day to check on his daughter, it felt too personal, too much like they were crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. She's okay. Shaken up, but okay. And you? The question caught him off guard. I'm fine, you're lying. Yeah, I am. There was a long pause. Then his phone rang. Victoria. You don't have to call me, Ethan said. I know. Victoria's voice was quiet. But I wanted to hear you say it. Say what? That you're not fine. Ethan leaned back on the couch, closing his eyes. I'm not fine. My daughter got laughed at because someone at work thinks I'm a joke. She defended me and got punished for it. And I can't even be angry because being angry doesn't pay rent. You can be angry with me. What good does that do? It's honest. Victoria paused. I'm sorry. This is my fault. I promoted you too visibly, made you a target. You gave me a chance. That's not your fault. Feels like it right now. They sat in silence for a moment. Ethan could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Lily asked me if we're going to be okay, he said finally. I told her yes, but I don't know if that's true. It will be. You don't know that? No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway. Victoria's voice was steady. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. We start training. You're going to learn everything Daniel should have taught you. And when you're done, no one will be able to question whether you earned your position. And if I still fail, then we figure out what comes next. Together. The word hung between them. Together. Like they were partners in this instead of employer and employee. Why do you care? Ethan asked quietly. Victoria was silent for so long he thought she might have hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because watching you fight for your daughter reminds me what it's like to fight for something that matters. And I'd forgotten. She hung up before he could respond. She hung up. Ethan sat in the dark, holding his phone, feeling like his entire world had shifted without him noticing exactly when it happened. 3 weeks ago, Victoria Sinclair had been an untouchable CEO he'd seen twice from a distance. Now she was calling him at night to make sure his daughter was okay. Now she was fighting battles for him that no one had asked her to fight. Now she was becoming something he didn't have a name for. The next morning, Ethan showed up to Victoria's office at 7:45. He'd barely slept. His eyes felt gritty and his hands wouldn't stop shaking, but he was there, early, ready. Victoria was already at her desk, reading something on her tablet. She looked up when he entered. You're early. Didn't want to be late. Good. She stood and walked to a small conference table in the corner of her office. We're going to start with the basics: supply chain architecture, routing optimization, inventory management. By the end of 6 weeks, you'll understand this company's logistics operations better than half the people who've been here for years. Okay. Victoria studied him. You look terrible. Didn't sleep much. Neither did I. She pulled out a chair. Sit down. We have a lot to cover. They worked for 4 hours straight. Victoria explained systems Ethan had only glimpsed pieces of. She broke down routing algorithms, showed him forecasting models, walked him through crisis management protocols. She was patient when he didn't understand something and direct when he made mistakes. She never talked down to him, never made him feel stupid for asking questions. It was the opposite of everything Daniel had done. At noon, Victoria ordered lunch to her office. They ate while she quizzed him on what they'd covered that morning. Ethan got about half the answers right. You're improving, Victoria said. I'm exhausted. Good. That means you're learning. She pulled up another document. This afternoon, we're going to talk about vendor negotiations. Tomorrow, financial forecasting. By Friday, strategic planning. This is more than 6 weeks of material. I know. That's why we're starting now. Victoria met his eyes. Daniel spent 2 weeks trying to prove you couldn't do this. I'm going to spend 6 weeks proving you can. What if I let you down? You won't. You keep saying that like it's a fact. It is a fact, because I don't invest time in people who quit. Victoria's expression softened slightly. And you're not a quitter, Ethan. You're just tired of fighting alone. The observation hit harder than it should have. Ethan looked away. I found out who the father is, Victoria said quietly. The one whose son said those things to Lily. Ethan's head snapped up. How? I have access to employee records, cross-referenced with the elementary school enrollment. Trevor's father is Brian Hendricks. He works in shipping coordination. Victoria, don't... I'm not going to fire him, but I'm going to have a conversation with his supervisor about professional conduct and the consequences of creating hostile work environments that affect employees' families. That's going to make things worse. No, it's going to make it clear that behavior has consequences. Victoria's voice was hard. Your daughter shouldn't suffer because grown men can't keep their opinions professional. Ethan wanted to argue, but the truth was he was tired of being the bigger person, tired of swallowing anger because expressing it might cost him everything. Thank you, he said quietly. Victoria nodded once. Then she went back to her tablet like the conversation had never happened. They worked until 6. When Ethan finally left Victoria's office, his brain felt like it had been wrung out and beaten. But he'd learned more in one day than he had in 2 weeks with Daniel. Mrs. Chen had picked up Lily from school. When Ethan got home, his daughter was doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up when he walked in. How was school? He asked. Okay. Trevor didn't talk to me. That's probably for the best. Lily was quiet for a moment, then, Dad, why is everyone so mean about your job? Ethan sat down next to her. Because some people judge worth by job titles instead of character, and they teach their kids to do the same thing. That's dumb. Yeah, baby, it is. Ms. Sinclair doesn't think you're a janitor. The observation was so matter-of-fact it caught Ethan off guard. No, she doesn't. I like her. She's nice. She's been very kind to us. Lily went back to her homework. Ethan made dinner, spaghetti from a box because it was cheap and filling. They ate together, and Lily talked about a book she was reading, and Ethan listened and tried to pretend everything was normal. But normal had stopped existing the night he'd met Victoria Sinclair in a dark warehouse, and he was starting to realize it wasn't coming back. 3 weeks passed in a blur. Ethan spent every morning in Victoria's office learning systems and strategies that rewrote everything he thought he knew about logistics. She was demanding but fair, brilliant but patient, cold to everyone else but somehow different with him. They fell into a rhythm. Coffee at 8. Training until noon, working lunch. More training until 4. Then Ethan would leave to pick up Lily while Victoria stayed in her office until late into the night. Sometimes they talked about work. Sometimes they didn't. Victoria told him about growing up in her father's shadow, about building a company while grieving, about the loneliness of being powerful. And Ethan told her about Sarah, about becoming a single parent at 29, about the terror of loving someone so much it could destroy you if anything happened to them. The conversations felt too honest for employer and employee, but neither of them acknowledged it. People noticed. Marcus made comments. Daniel glared whenever they passed each other. The department heads whispered, but Victoria didn't care. And eventually, Ethan stopped caring too. By the end of the 4th week, Ethan was helping Victoria review strategic proposals. By the 5th week, she had him sitting in on vendor negotiations. By the 6th week, he was drafting logistics plans she was actually implementing. You're ready, Victoria said on Friday afternoon of the 6th week. Ethan looked up from the spreadsheet he was analyzing. For what? To go back. To prove Daniel and everyone else wrong. She closed her laptop. Monday, you'll rejoin the logistics team. Different supervisor. I'm transferring Daniel to the Portland office and promoting Lisa Chen to department head. She'll be fair. You're transferring Daniel because of me? I'm transferring Daniel because he's been toxic for months, and your situation finally gave me the justification. Victoria's expression was unreadable. But yes, partly because of you. Ethan didn't know what to say. I'm going to miss this. Miss what? Working with you, learning from you. He paused. Talking to you. Something flickered across Victoria's face. We'll still talk. It won't be the same, eh? No, it won't. Victoria stood and walked to the window. But it's necessary. People are already speculating about our relationship. If I keep you here any longer, It will undermine everything you've learned. Do you care what people think? Not about most things, but I care about your reputation and your daughter's well-being. She turned to look at him. You've worked hard. You've earned respect. I won't let rumors take that away from you. Ethan walked over to stand next to her. They looked out at the city together, the Seattle skyline gray and beautiful against the winter sky. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything. You earned it. I mean, for believing in me when no one else did. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Someone should have believed in you a long time ago. I'm just late. They stood there in silence. Ethan was acutely aware of how close they were standing, how he could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle, how her reflection in the window looked softer than the real version. Victoria, he started. His phone rang. Lily's school. Ethan's blood went cold. He answered. Hello? Mr. Vale? This is the school nurse. Lily's having trouble breathing. The nebulizer isn't helping. I think you need to take her to the hospital. Some ashisti. Everything else disappeared. Ethan ran. He grabbed his keys and sprinted toward the elevator, Victoria right behind him. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely press the button. The doors opened and they stepped inside. The descent felt like it took hours instead of seconds. My car's faster, Victoria said. Ethan didn't argue. They ran across the parking garage to her Mercedes. She drove like she made business decisions, fast, precise, and completely in control. They made it to the elementary school in 8 minutes. The nurse met them at the entrance. Lily was sitting on a cot in the nurse's office, the oxygen mask on her face. Her lips had a bluish tint that made Ethan's stomach drop. She saw him and started crying. Dad! I'm here, baby. I'm here. Ethan knelt next to the cot, taking her hand. It was so small in his. We're going to get you help, okay? The nurse handed him paperwork. I've already called ahead to Seattle Children's. They're expecting you. Victoria was on her phone. I'm sending my driver to pick up Mrs. Chen. She'll meet you at the hospital with anything Lily needs. She looked at the nurse. Can she be moved safely? The ambulance is too slow, Victoria interrupted. My car is right outside. It'll be faster. The nurse hesitated, then nodded. Keep the oxygen on her. If her breathing gets worse, call 911 immediately. Ethan carried Lily to the Mercedes. She felt too light in his arms, like she weighed nothing at all. Victoria held the back door open and Ethan climbed in with Lily on his lap, keeping the mask pressed to her face. Victoria drove even faster this time. She ran 2 yellow lights and took corners hard enough that the tires squealed. Ethan didn't care. All he could focus on was Lily's breathing, shallow and labored, each inhale sounding like it hurt. You're okay, he kept saying. You're okay, baby. But he didn't know if that was true. They made it to the hospital in 12 minutes. Victoria pulled up to the emergency entrance and a team was already waiting with a wheelchair. They took Lily immediately, asking Ethan rapid-fire questions about her medical history while they wheeled her through automatic doors that swallowed her up. Ethan tried to follow, but a nurse stopped him. Sir, we need you to check her in first. Admissions is, I need to be with my daughter. I understand, but we need insurance information and I'll handle it. Victoria appeared next to him. She handed the nurse a black credit card. Put everything on this. Room, medication, procedures, whatever she needs. The nurse blinked. Ma'am, that's not how... Make it work. Victoria's voice left no room for argument. She turned to Ethan. Go be with Lily. I'll deal with this. Ethan wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her she didn't need to do this. But his daughter was somewhere behind those doors and he needed to be there. He ran. A nurse led him to a room where they'd put Lily on a hospital bed. She looked so small, surrounded by machines and monitors. A doctor was listening to her chest with a stethoscope, his expression serious. Mr. Vale, I'm Dr. Patterson. Your daughter's experiencing a severe asthma attack. Her oxygen saturation is too low, and she's not responding well to standard treatments. We're going to admit her and start more aggressive interventions. The words felt like being underwater. Is she going to be okay? We're doing everything we can, but I need to ask, has her medication changed recently? Guilt crashed over Ethan like a wave. Yeah, about 2 months ago. The name brand was too expensive, so we switched to generic. Dr. Patterson's expression didn't change, but Ethan saw the judgment anyway. The generic formulation isn't as effective for some patients, especially children with severe asthma. I know, I couldn't afford it. I understand, but we're going to need to get her back on the name brand medication immediately, along with some additional treatments to get her stabilized. Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The doctor left and Ethan sat next to Lily's bed, holding her hand while nurses came and went, adjusting machines and checking vitals and speaking in medical terminology that sounded like a foreign language. Lily's eyes were closed, but she was still awake. Dad? Yeah, baby. I'm scared. I know, me too. He squeezed her hand. But you're tough. Remember when you fell off your bike and split your chin open? You were so brave. This is worse than that. I know. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, is Ms. Sinclair still here? Ethan glanced toward the door. I think so. Why? I like when she's here. She makes you less worried. The observation hit him hard. You can tell when I'm worried? You're always worried, Dad, just less when she's around. Before Ethan could respond, Victoria walked in. She'd somehow procured coffee in a paper cup and handed it to him without a word. Then she pulled up a chair on the other side of Lily's bed and sat down. Hey, she said softly to Lily. Hi. Lily's voice was muffled by the oxygen mask. How are you feeling? Bad. Yeah, hospitals are the worst. Victoria glanced at the monitors. But they're going to fix you up. Promise? Victoria met Lily's eyes. I promise. It was the kind of promise adults shouldn't make to kids because you couldn't control outcomes or guarantee results. But Lily believed it. Ethan could see the tension leave her small shoulders. A nurse came in with more medication. Victoria and Ethan moved to the corner of the room while they administered it. Ethan watched them hook up another IV, feeling helpless. You shouldn't have paid for this, he said quietly to Victoria. Someone had to. I could have figured it out. Applied for financial assistance or, while your daughter struggled to breathe? No. Victoria's voice was firm. Money fixes some problems. This is one of them. Let me fix it. I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to. Ethan turned to look at her. Why are you doing this? Victoria was quiet for a moment. When I was 12 and my mother was dying, my father spent 3 months negotiating with insurance companies about experimental treatments. He was one of the wealthiest men in Seattle, and he still had to fight for her care because the system is designed to make people beg. She paused. She died anyway. But I remember thinking that if we'd had to choose between bankruptcy and her life, we would have chosen bankruptcy without hesitation. Money means nothing compared to the people you love. You barely know us. I know enough. Victoria looked at Lily. I know your daughter is brave and kind and deserves parents who don't have to choose between medication and rent. And I know you would set yourself on fire to keep her warm. That's enough. The nurse finished with the IV and left. Lily's breathing was already sounding a little easier. The bluish tint was fading from her lips. Ethan sat back down next to her bed. Victoria stayed in her chair on the other side. They sat in silence, watching machines beep and monitors display numbers Ethan didn't understand. Around midnight, a different doctor came in, older with kind eyes and gray hair. Mr. Vale? I'm Dr. Stevens, the pediatric pulmonologist. I've reviewed Lily's case and I have some concerns. Ethan's stomach tightened. What kind of concerns? Her asthma is more severe than the generic medication can manage. She needs to be on a specific treatment protocol, combination inhalers, a daily preventive, and a rescue inhaler for emergencies. The cost is approximately $600 a month, even with insurance. $600. Ethan did the math automatically. That was groceries and utilities. That was the difference between making rent and not making rent. I'll find a way, he said. There are assistance programs. I'll find a way, Ethan repeated, his voice harder than he meant it. Dr. Stevens nodded. We're going to keep her overnight for observation. If her oxygen levels stabilize, she can go home tomorrow afternoon. After the doctor left, Victoria stood up. I'm going to make some calls. It's midnight. I'm aware. She walked into the hallway. Ethan wanted to follow her, to tell her to stop fixing his problems, but Lily squeezed his hand. Dad? Yeah? I'm sorry. For what, baby? For being expensive. Ethan's heart broke. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Don't you dare apologize for being alive. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You're worth everything. Even $600 a month? Even $6 million a month. Lily smiled behind her oxygen mask. Then her eyes started to close, the medication making her drowsy. Ethan sat holding her hand, watching her drift off to sleep. Victoria came back an hour later. She looked tired. Her perfect hair was starting to come loose from its severe style. Her suit jacket was wrinkled. I talked to the hospital administrator, she said quietly. CTEC has a corporate healthcare fund for employees facing medical hardship. I'm authorizing coverage for Lily's medication through the company plan. That's not a real thing. It is now. I just created it. Ethan stared at her. You can't just create corporate policies at midnight to help one person. I'm the CEO. I can do whatever I want. Victoria sat down, suddenly looking exhausted. The fund will cover 80% of medication costs for employees with dependents facing chronic illness. Lily qualifies. So will other people's children. It's good policy. You're doing this because of her. I'm doing this because it should have existed already. Your situation just made it obvious. Victoria rubbed her eyes. Go home, Ethan. Get some sleep. I'll stay with Lily. I'm not leaving her. Then let me get you a cot. You can't sit in that chair all night. I've done worse. They sat in silence, both watching Lily sleep. The machines beeped rhythmically. Nurses came and went. The hospital settled into the quiet hum of nighttime medical care. Around 3 a.m., Ethan's eyes started to close despite himself. He jerked awake, forcing them open. Sleep, Victoria said. I'll wake you if anything changes. I can't. Yes, you can. I'm here. She's not alone. Something about the way she said it made Ethan's defenses crumble. He was so tired of fighting, tired of being strong, tired of pretending he could handle everything alone. He closed his eyes. When he woke up, gray morning light was filtering through the hospital room window. Lily was still asleep, and Victoria was still there, exactly where she'd been hours ago, looking like she hadn't moved. Did you sleep at all? Ethan asked, his voice rough. No. Victoria. I wanted to make sure she was okay. Victoria stood up and stretched. Doctor. Stevens came by around 5. Her oxygen levels are improving. He thinks she can go home this afternoon. Relief flooded through Ethan. Thank you for staying. Where else would I go? It was such a simple question, but it made Ethan realize something. Victoria didn't have anywhere else to go. No family waiting at home. No partner wondering where she was. Just an empty house and a company that demanded everything and gave nothing back. You should go home, Ethan said. Get some real sleep. I can handle it from here. I'm fine. You're exhausted. So are you. They looked at each other. Victoria's perfect exterior was cracking. Her makeup had faded. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her blouse was wrinkled. She looked human in a way she never did at the office. Why are you really here? Ethan asked quietly. Victoria was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because when my mother was dying, I sat alone in hospital rooms like this one. My father was always working, too busy to watch her deteriorate, too important to waste time on something he couldn't fix. She paused. I was 12 years old, and I sat alone with machines beeping and nurses coming and going, and I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to make sure someone else didn't feel that alone, I would take it. I'm not 12. No, but Lily is 8, and if something had gone wrong last night, she shouldn't have to wake up and wonder why no one stayed. Ethan didn't know what to say. Every time he thought he understood Victoria Sinclair, she revealed another layer that made her more complicated. Lily stirred. Her eyes opened and she looked around, confused for a moment before memory caught up. She saw Ethan and Victoria on either side of her bed and smiled. You're both still here. Of course we are, Victoria said. Dad never leaves, but I didn't think you would stay. Why not? Because you're important. You have important things to do. Victoria leaned forward. Lily, I want you to understand something. There is nothing more important than making sure you're okay. Not work, not meetings, not anything. Lily's eyes got wide. Really? Really? Wow. Lily looked at Ethan. I like her, Dad. Yeah, baby. I know. Oh. Dr. Stevens came in around noon. He examined Lily, checked her charts, and declared her stable enough to go home. He handed Ethan discharge papers and a prescription list that made his stomach turn. 6 different medications, instructions for twice-daily treatments, warning signs to watch for. She needs to follow up with her regular pediatrician within a week, Dr. Stevens said. And if her breathing gets worse again, bring her back immediately. I will, but I'm serious, Mr. Vale. The generic medication nearly killed her. Don't make that mistake again. The words were harsh but fair. Ethan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Victoria handled the discharge paperwork while Ethan got Lily dressed. Mrs. Chen had brought clothes earlier that morning, the purple unicorn pajamas Lily loved. She looked tiny and fragile in them. Can I go back to school tomorrow? Lily asked. Not tomorrow. You need to rest. But I'll miss story time. There'll be other story times. Lily pouted but didn't argue. She was too tired. Victoria's driver pulled up to the entrance in a black town car. Ethan started to object, but Victoria cut him off. Your truck is at the school. This is faster. She was right. Ethan was too tired to argue anyway. They rode to Ethan's apartment in silence. Lily fell asleep against Ethan's shoulder. Victoria stared out the window, lost in thought. When they arrived, Victoria helped carry Lily upstairs. Mrs. Chen met them at the door, her expression worried but relieved. I'll make soup, Mrs. Chen said. She should eat. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Ethan put Lily to bed. She was asleep again before he finished tucking her in. He stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. Each inhale and exhale felt like a miracle. When he came back to the living room, Victoria was still there. She looked out of place in his tiny apartment with her expensive clothes and perfect posture. Thank you, Ethan said, for everything. I don't know how to... Don't! Victoria held up a hand. Please don't thank me. I did what anyone would do. That's not true. Most people wouldn't have stayed all night. Most people wouldn't have created a corporate policy to cover medication costs. Most people wouldn't have cared. I'm not most people. I know. They stood looking at each other across his cramped living room. The space between them felt charged with something Ethan couldn't name. I should go, Victoria said finally. Let you rest. Victoria, she turned at the door. Why are you doing this, Ethan asked. Really, not the corporate responsibility answer or the policy justification. Why do you care about me and Lily? Victoria was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was raw. Because you remind me that people can be good without expecting anything in return. That caring about someone isn't a weakness. That maybe I don't have to be cold to be strong. She paused. And because when I'm with you and Lily, I feel like a person instead of a position. The confession hung between them, too honest and too real. You are a person, Ethan said quietly. Sometimes I forget. She left before he could respond. Ethan stood in his empty living room, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway, and wondered when exactly his life had become so tangled up with hers. The next week was strange. Lily stayed home from school, recovering slowly. Her breathing was better with the new medication, but she tired easily. Ethan took time off work to care for her, using the sick days his new benefits package included. Victoria texted him every day. How is she? Better. Still tired. And you? Tired too. But okay. The messages were simple, but they mattered. They made Ethan feel less alone. On Thursday, a package arrived. Inside was a tablet with a note in Victoria's handwriting. So Lily doesn't miss too much school, apps for reading and math, and some games because being sick is boring. Lily's face lit up when she saw it. This is from Miss Sinclair? Yeah, she's the best. Ethan couldn't argue with that. Friday afternoon, there was a knock on the door. Ethan opened it to find Victoria standing in his hallway, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual suit. She looked younger somehow, more approachable. Hi, she said. Hi, what are you doing here? I brought dinner. Figured you're probably tired of cooking. She held up bags from an Italian place downtown that Ethan had never been able to afford. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, shucked. Ethan let her in. Lily was on the couch watching something on the new tablet. She saw Victoria and grinned. You came. I did. How are you feeling? Better. Look what you got me. Lily held up the tablet. I can do my homework on it and everything. That's great. They ate dinner together at Ethan's small kitchen table. Victoria had brought enough food for an army: pasta, salad, bread, even dessert. Lily talked non-stop about the games on the tablet and what she'd been reading. Victoria listened like it was the most important conversation she'd had all week. After dinner, Lily went back to the couch to watch a movie. Ethan and Victoria cleaned up the kitchen together, falling into an easy rhythm that felt too domestic for what they were supposed to be. This is nice, Victoria said quietly. What is? This. Being normal. Doing dishes in a kitchen that isn't professionally designed. Eating dinner with people who actually want me here instead of people who are obligated to include me. Ethan dried a plate. You're always welcome here. Am I? Yeah, you are. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Your apartment is small. I know, but it feels like a home. My house is 8,000 square feet, and I can go days without seeing another person. That sounds lonely. It is. Victoria handed him another dish. But I chose it. I built walls so high no one could climb them, made myself untouchable. And then I met you bleeding on a warehouse floor and you somehow got through anyway. Ethan's chest tightened. Victoria, I'm not good at this, she interrupted. At being close to people. At letting them in. I don't know how to do it without it being a business transaction or a power dynamic or something I can control. You don't have to control everything. I know, but not controlling things terrifies me. Ethan set down the dish towel and turned to face her. What are you scared of? Victoria met his eyes. That if I let myself care about you and Lily, something will happen and I'll lose you. That I'll fail to protect you the way I failed to protect my mother. That I'll prove my father right and feelings will make me weak. Caring about people doesn't make you weak. It feels like it does. It doesn't. It just makes you human. Victoria laughed, but it sounded sad. I've spent 10 years trying not to be human. It's a hard habit to break. From the living room, Lily called out, Dad, Ms. Sinclair, come watch this part. They went to the couch. Lily had made room between herself and Ethan, clearly expecting Victoria to sit there. Victoria hesitated, then sat down. Lily immediately leaned against her shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. Victoria went completely still. Then slowly, carefully, she put her arm around Lily. They watched the movie together. Ethan kept glancing over at Victoria, at the way she held Lily like she was something precious and fragile, at the way her expression had softened into something that looked almost like contentment. When the movie ended, Lily was asleep against Victoria's shoulder. I should put her to bed, Ethan said quietly. Let me. Victoria carefully lifted Lily, carrying her to her bedroom. Ethan followed, watching as Victoria laid her down and pulled the blanket up. Lily murmured something in her sleep, but didn't wake. They stood in the doorway together, watching her breathe. She's lucky to have you, Victoria said softly. I'm the lucky one. No, you're both lucky to have each other. Victoria's voice caught slightly. Some people never get that. Ethan looked at her. In the dim light from the hallway, she looked vulnerable in a way he'd never seen before. You could have that, he said. Could I? Yeah, if you wanted it. Victoria turned to face him. They were standing so close Ethan could smell her perfume, could see the gold flecks in her eyes, could count the freckles on her nose that her makeup usually hid. I don't know how to want things that aren't work, she said quietly. I don't know how to want a life that isn't professional achievement and quarterly reports and proving I'm good enough. You're already good enough, Victoria. Am I? Yeah, you are. She looked at him like she wanted to believe it, but couldn't quite get there. I should go. You could stay. The words were out before Ethan could stop them. They hung in the air, too heavy with implication. I shouldn't, Victoria said. Why not? Because I'm your boss. Because people already think we're involved. Because staying would cross every professional line we've been pretending isn't already blurred. What if I don't care about professional lines anymore? Victoria's breath caught. Ethan, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. You don't have to go back to an empty house. You could stay here, on the couch, just so you're not alone. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Ethan got her a blanket and a pillow. They said goodnight awkwardly, both too aware of how strange this was. Ethan went to his room but couldn't sleep. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Victoria on his couch and Lily asleep down the hall, and how his life had become something he didn't recognize. Around 2 a.m., he heard soft footsteps. Then his door opened slightly. Ethan? Victoria's voice was quiet. Are you awake? Yeah. She stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the hallway light. I can't sleep. Me neither. Can I? She stopped, started again. Can I just sit here? I don't want to be alone. Yeah, of course. Victoria came in and sat on the edge of his bed. They sat in darkness and silence, not touching, but somehow together. I haven't felt safe in 10 years, Victoria said finally. Not since my mother died. I felt powerful, successful, in control, but never safe. What does safe feel like? Like this. Like I could fall apart and someone would still be here. Ethan reached over and took her hand. She gripped it like a lifeline. They sat like that until morning. When Ethan woke up, Victoria was gone. There was a note on his nightstand in her handwriting. Thank you for everything. See you Monday. Monday came faster than Ethan expected. He dropped Lily off at school, her first day back, and drove to work with his stomach in knots. He was officially rejoining the logistics team today. New supervisor. New desk. Same coworkers who'd spent 6 weeks speculating about his relationship with the CEO. Lisa Chen met him at the entrance to the logistics office. She was in her 40s, competent and no nonsense, with a reputation for being fair but demanding. Ethan, welcome back. Let me show you to your desk. She led him to a desk near the window. It was the same one he'd had before, but somehow it felt different. People were watching him. Not openly, but he could feel their eyes. Marcus walked past without acknowledging him. Lisa gave him his first assignment, a routing optimization project that actually made sense. She explained what she needed, answered his questions without judgment, and told him her door was always open. It was everything Daniel hadn't been. Ethan worked through lunch, determined to prove he belonged here. At 3, his phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. How's the first day? Good, Lisa's fair. Assignments make sense. Good. Let me know if anyone gives you trouble. I can handle it. I know. But you don't have to handle it alone. Ethan stared at the message, something warm spreading through his chest. He typed back, Thank you for everything. The response came immediately. Stop thanking me. Make me. There was a long pause. Then, Don't tempt me. Ethan smiled at his phone like an idiot. He was still smiling when Marcus walked by. Texting the boss, Marcus asked. Working. Right. Sure looks like work. Marcus leaned against Ethan's desk. So how long do you think this is going to last? How long is what going to last? You and Sinclair, the whole special treatment thing. Because eventually she's going to get bored. Move on to the next charity case. And then what? You think you're actually qualified for this job? Ethan set down his phone. You want to say something to me, Marcus? Then say it. I'm just making an observation. You slept your way into a position people actually earned. And when it all falls apart, the rest of us will still be here doing real work. I didn't sleep with anyone. Sure you didn't. That's why she pays for your kid's medication and visits your apartment and keeps you close. Because you're special. Marcus smiled. You're not special, man. You're just convenient. The words hit exactly where they were meant to. Ethan's fists clenched. Walk away, Marcus. Or what? You'll run to Victoria and she'll fire me? That's exactly my point. You don't fight your own battles. No, but I win them anyway. Victoria's voice cut across the office. She was standing 20 feet away, arms crossed. Ethan had no idea how long she'd been there. Marcus went pale. Ms. Sinclair, I was just... You were just creating a hostile work environment in front of witnesses. Victoria walked closer. Clean out your desk. You're terminated effective immediately. You can't fire me for having an opinion. I'm not firing you for having an opinion. I'm firing you for harassing an employee, making inappropriate comments about his personal life, and creating a toxic work environment, all of which have been documented by HR over the past 2 months. Marcus looked around desperately. This is because of him, because he's sleeping with you. No, this is because you're a mediocre employee who mistakes cruelty for competence. Security will escort you out. 2 security guards appeared as if summoned. Marcus started to argue, but one look at Victoria's face shut him down. They led him away, still protesting. The office was completely silent. Victoria looked around at everyone watching. Anyone else have comments about Mr. Vale's qualifications or personal life? No one spoke. Good, get back to work. She walked away without looking at Ethan. He sat frozen, unsure if he should feel grateful or humiliated. Lisa appeared next to his desk. Well, that was something. I didn't ask her to do that. I know, but she did it anyway. Lisa sat on the edge of his desk. Word of advice? People are going to talk no matter what you do. You can either spend your energy trying to stop them, or you can spend it proving them wrong. I'd suggest the latter. She was right. Ethan knew she was right, but it didn't make the stares any easier to ignore. That evening, Ethan picked up Lily from school and took her to the park. She was still getting her energy back, but she wanted to play. He pushed her on the swings, watching her laugh, and tried not to think about the mess his life had become. His phone rang. Victoria. Hey, he answered. Are you okay? I should be asking you that. You fired someone today because of me. I fired someone today because he was toxic and insubordinate. You were just the catalyst. Victoria paused. Did I overstep? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Ethan watched Lily on the swings. Everyone's going to think we're sleeping together now. They already thought that. Now they're sure of it. Does that bother you? Ethan thought about it. Yeah, it does. Because it's not true, and it makes everything we've actually built feel cheap. Victoria was quiet. What have we built? I don't know. Friendship? Trust? He paused. Something that matters. It does matter. Then why does it feel so complicated? Because people are complicated. And we're people, despite what everyone thinks. Lily called out from the swings. Dad, watch this! She jumped off mid-swing, landing hard in the sand. Ethan's heart stopped, but she popped up grinning, completely fine. Did you see? She yelled. I saw. Very impressive. Also terrifying. Please don't do that again. Victoria laughed on the other end of the phone. It was such a genuine sound that it made Ethan smile. I should let you go, Victoria said. Yeah, Lily wants dinner. Ethan? Yeah? For what it's worth, I don't regret it. Any of it. Me neither. After they hung up, Ethan stood in the park watching his daughter play and realized something. His life was complicated and messy and public in ways he'd never wanted. But it was also fuller than it had been in years. Maybe complicated wasn't always bad. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat on his couch and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his conversation with Victoria. Hundreds of messages over the past 2 months. Work questions that had turned into actual conversations. Check-ins that had turned into confessions. Professional distance that had turned into something neither of them had a name for. He started typing. I know this is complicated. And I know people are going to assume things that aren't true. But I need you to know that what you've done for me and Lily matters. You matter. And I'm not going to let other people's opinions change that. The response came faster than he expected. You matter too, more than you realize. Ethan stared at those words for a long time. Then he made a decision. Can I see you this weekend? Not work stuff, just us. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, a response. Yes. Saturday morning arrived cold and gray. The kind of November weather that made Seattle feel like it was wrapped in wet wool. Ethan woke up early, nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first date with Sarah a lifetime ago. He made breakfast for Lily, pancakes because she deserved them, and tried to act like today was normal. It wasn't normal. Today he was meeting Victoria. Not his boss, Victoria, just Victoria. And he had no idea what that meant. Mrs. Chen agreed to watch Lily for a few hours. She gave Ethan a knowing look when he asked, but didn't pry. Lily was more direct. "Are you going to see Miss Sinclair?" She asked around a mouthful of pancake. "Yeah, baby, just for a little while." "Are you guys dating?" Ethan nearly choked on his coffee. "What? No, we're friends." "Friends don't look at each other the way you guys do." "How do we look at each other?" "What?" Lily shrugged. "Like you're both scared, but you want to be brave." Sometimes Ethan forgot his daughter was smarter than he was. "It's complicated," he said finally. "Adults always say that when they don't know what's happening." Lily took another bite. "I like her, Dad. She makes you smile." "Yeah, she does." "Then you should definitely be dating." Ethan laughed despite himself. "I'll keep that in mind." He met Victoria at a small coffee shop in Fremont, far enough from downtown that they were unlikely to run into anyone from work. She was already there when he arrived, sitting in a corner booth wearing jeans and a gray sweater that made her look younger. Her hair was down. He'd never seen it down before. She looked nervous. "Hi," Ethan said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Hi." Victoria had a cup of coffee in front of her that didn't look touched. "I ordered you black coffee. That's what you drink at the office." "Yeah, thanks." He took a sip. It was terrible coffee, but he didn't care. "You look different. Different good or different bad?" "Just different. More like a person who goes to coffee shops on Saturday instead of someone who runs board meetings." Victoria smiled slightly. "I wasn't sure I remembered how to be that person anymore." They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Ethan had imagined this conversation 100 times, but now that he was here, he didn't know where to start. "This is weird," Victoria said. "Yeah, it is. I don't know how to do this. Be normal. With you." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "At work there are rules, power structures, expectations. Out here it's just us, and I don't know what that means. It means we're two people having coffee. Are we? Or are we a CEO and an employee crossing lines we shouldn't cross?" Ethan leaned forward. "What do you want us to be?" Victoria looked at him with those sharp eyes that saw too much. "I don't know. All I know is that when I'm with you and Lily, I feel like myself for the first time in years. And that terrifies me." "Why does it terrify you? Saw it." "Because people I care about leave. My mother died. My father chose work over me. Everyone I've let close either left or used me." She paused. "And you have every reason to do the same. I'm your boss. I hold your career in my hands. There's an inherent imbalance here that makes anything real between us complicated. So what do we do?" "I don't know." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. Victoria stiffened, then slowly relaxed. "I'm not using you," he said quietly, "and I'm not going anywhere. Whatever this is between us, it's real. Maybe it's messy and complicated and breaks every HR rule ever written, but it's real." "How do you know?" "Because I've spent 3 months trying to convince myself I'm imagining it. That you're just being kind because that's what decent people do. But it's more than that. You see me, not the warehouse worker, or the struggling single dad, or the charity case. You see me." Dimas something. Victoria's eyes were shining. "I see you because you're the first person in 10 years who wasn't afraid to see me back. Everyone else sees the CEO, the ice queen, the woman who fired 200 people and didn't cry. You see the person who sat in hospital rooms alone when she was 12, who created a corporate policy at midnight because one little girl needed medication, who doesn't know how to want things that aren't professional achievements. I see all of it. That's what scares me." They sat holding hands across a coffee shop table while the world moved around them. Other customers came and went. The barista made drinks. Rain started falling outside, turning the windows into abstract paintings. "What do we do now?" Victoria asked. "Honestly, I have no idea." Ethan laughed, surprising himself. "I've never done this before. The whole falling for your boss thing, it wasn't in my life plan." "You're falling for me?" "Ushoi. Baltbussers." The question was so vulnerable it made Ethan's chest ache. "Yeah, I think I am. Have been for a while now." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I bought Lily that tablet because I wanted an excuse to see her again. To see you. I created that corporate policy because the idea of you struggling alone made me physically ill. I fired Marcus because hearing him talk about you like that made me want to destroy him. So? She met his eyes. I don't do those things for employees. I do them for people I care about. So we're admitting we care about each other. Apparently. What happens Monday? Monday, I'm still the CEO and you're still my employee. That doesn't change. Victoria's voice was firm. But maybe outside of work, we can be something else. Something that isn't defined by power dynamics or professional obligations. And if people find out, they already think we're sleeping together. Might as well give them something real to talk about. Ethan smiled. Is this you asking me on a date? I think this is me admitting I want to, but I don't know how without it affecting your career or making things harder for you. Let me worry about my career. You just worry about whether you actually want this. I do. The words came out fast, like Victoria was afraid if she waited, she'd lose her nerve. I want Saturday mornings at coffee shops. I want to watch movies on your couch with Lily falling asleep between us. I want conversations that aren't about quarterly reports. I want to be someone other than the person my father created. Then let's do it. All of it. Slowly and carefully, and however we need to make it work. Victoria squeezed his hand. Okay, say. They spent the rest of the morning talking. Real talking, not the careful professional conversations they had at work. Victoria told him about growing up in a house that felt like a museum, about learning to hide emotions because showing them was weakness, about the loneliness of being powerful and untouchable. And Ethan told her about Sarah, about becoming a father at 29 and losing his partner at 30, about the terror of raising a child alone while pretending everything was fine. Do you still love her? Victoria asked quietly. Sarah? Ethan thought about it. I'll always love who she was, the mother of my daughter, the woman who made me believe in partnership. But she's been gone for 7 years. I'm not the same person I was then, and holding on to her memory so tight that I can't move forward isn't honoring her. It's just being afraid. Afraid of what? Of losing someone again. Of letting Lily get attached to someone who might leave. He paused. Of letting myself feel something real and having it destroy me if it ends. Victoria nodded like she understood completely. That's why I've stayed alone. If you never let anyone close, they can't hurt you when they leave. But they also can't make you feel less alone when you need it. No, they can't. Victoria looked at him. Lily asked me once why I was sad. I told her I wasn't. She said I was pretending not to be. 8 years old, and she saw right through me. She sees through everyone. It's terrifying. She sees you working yourself to death to give her a good life. And she loves you for it. Victoria's voice was soft. But she also wants you to be happy. She told me that. When you were in the hospital room sleeping and I was sitting with her, she said she wished you smiled more. Ethan's throat tightened. She said that? Yeah. And then she said maybe if I stayed around, you'd smile more because you smile when I'm there. She's too smart for her own good. She's amazing. You raised an amazing kid. I'm just trying not to screw her up too badly. You're doing better than that. Victoria finished her coffee, which had gone cold. She's brave and kind and honest. That doesn't happen by accident. They left the coffee shop around noon. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray. They walked through Fremont without any destination, just moving together through the wet streets. I should get back to Lily, Ethan said eventually. Can I come with you? The question surprised him. You want to spend more time with us? If that's okay. Yeah, of course it is. They went back to Ethan's apartment. Lily was coloring at the kitchen table when they walked in. She looked up and her face lit up. Miss Sinclair, you came. I did. Is that okay? Yeah, can you help me with this? Lily held up a coloring book. I can't decide if the dragon should be purple or green. Victoria sat down next to her. Purple. Definitely purple. Green dragons are too common. That's what I thought. Ethan watched them together. Victoria bent over a coloring book with the same focused attention she probably gave to merger agreements, and felt something shift inside his chest. This was what he wanted, not just for himself but for Lily. Someone who showed up. Someone who stayed. Mrs. Chen poked her head in from the living room. Everything okay? Get go. Yeah, Mrs. Chen, thank you for watching her. Any time. Mrs. Chen glanced at Victoria, then back at Ethan, and smiled knowingly. Any time. After she left, the three of them spent the afternoon doing nothing important. They colored, watched a movie, made lunch from whatever was in the fridge, grilled cheese that wasn't perfect, but tasted better because they made it together. Lily talked non-stop, telling Victoria about school and her friends, and the book she was reading about dragons. Victoria listened to all of it like it mattered. Like an 8-year-old's opinion on fictional creatures was the most important thing she'd heard all week. Around 4, Lily fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from talking. Ethan covered her with a blanket and he and Victoria moved to the kitchen. Thank you for today, Ethan said quietly. I should be thanking you. This is the most normal I've felt in years. Normal is good. Normal is terrifying. Victoria leaned against the counter. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. For you to realize I'm too complicated, or too damaged, or too much work. You're not too much of anything, you're just right. How can you know that? Because I've spent 3 months watching you be both the coldest person in a boardroom and the warmest person in a hospital room. You're complicated, but complicated doesn't mean broken. Victoria looked at him with something like wonder. How do you do that? Do what? Make things sound simple when they're not. They are simple. People just make them complicated. Ethan stepped closer. I like you. You like me. We both care about Lily. Everything else is just details we figure out as we go. And work? Work is work. This is us. Victoria reached up and touched his face, her fingers careful like she was afraid he might disappear. I haven't let anyone close in so long I don't remember how. Then we learn together. She kissed him. It was soft and tentative and tasted like coffee and uncertainty. Ethan kissed her back, his hands finding her waist, pulling her closer. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The complications, the power dynamics, the fear. There was just this. Just them. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. A real smile. Not the careful, controlled one she wore at work, but something genuine. That was nice, she said. Yeah, it was. We should probably talk about what this means. Probably. But can we just exist in it for a minute first? Figure out the logistics later? Victoria laughed. The CEO of a logistics company doesn't want to figure out logistics. That's ironic. Sometimes you just have to trust the process. I'm terrible at trusting processes I don't control. I know. We'll work on it. They spent the rest of the evening together. Victoria stayed for dinner. More grilled cheese because Lily requested it. They ate at Ethan's tiny table, and it felt more right than any expensive restaurant ever could. After dinner, Lily insisted Victoria read her a bedtime story. Victoria read with the same serious attention she gave everything, doing voices that made Lily giggle. When Lily was asleep, Ethan walked Victoria to the door. Today was good, Victoria said. Yeah, it was. I want more days like this. So do I. But we need to be careful. At work, nothing changes. Professional boundaries, no favoritism, no special treatment. Agreed. And if this doesn't work, if we try and it's too complicated, we stay professional. For your career and Lily's stability. Okay. Victoria looked at him. You're agreeing very easily to a lot of conditions. Because I trust you. And because I think we can make this work if we're both honest about what we want. What do you want? Ethan thought about it. I want Saturday mornings. I want someone who makes Lily laugh. I want to stop feeling like I'm fighting alone. And I want you, however that looks, whatever that means. That's what I want too. Victoria kissed him again, longer this time. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining. I should go. Text me when you get home. That's very domestic of you. Get used to it. Victoria left smiling. Ethan closed the door and leaned against it, feeling like his entire life had just shifted direction without him noticing exactly when it happened. The next few weeks were strange and wonderful and terrifying. At work, nothing changed. Victoria was still the CEO. Ethan was still learning his role. They kept their distance, professional, appropriate. But outside of work, they built something that felt real. Victoria came over most weekends. They cooked dinner together, badly because neither of them was particularly good at it. They watched movies, took Lily to the park, did normal things that felt extraordinary because they were doing them together. Lily loved it. She loved having Victoria around, loved the attention and the laughter and the feeling of family that had been missing since Sarah died. And Ethan loved watching Victoria transform from the ice queen everyone feared into someone who laughed at bad jokes and did voices for bedtime stories and didn't mind getting flour in her hair when they made pancakes. But keeping their relationship secret at work was exhausting. Every interaction was calculated, every glance was measured. They couldn't be seen together outside of professional contexts, couldn't acknowledge what everyone already suspected. It came to a head 3 weeks later. Ethan was in a department meeting when Robert Chang brought up a new logistics initiative. It was a good idea in theory, but terribly executed in practice. Ethan saw the flaws immediately. The routing would create bottlenecks, the timeline was unrealistic, the cost projections were wrong. He should have stayed quiet. Let someone else point it out, but he'd spent 6 weeks learning from the best and he knew he was right. That won't work, Ethan said. Robert looked at him. Excuse me? The routing structure. It creates bottlenecks at major hubs. You'd need to restructure the entire network or build in buffer time that would eliminate your cost savings. And you know this how? Because I've studied the network architecture. The hubs can't handle simultaneous large volume transfers. You'd need to stagger them or increase capacity first. Robert's expression hardened. That's a very confident opinion for someone who's been in this role for 2 months. It's not an opinion, it's math. Ethan pulled up a spreadsheet on his laptop. Look at the hub capacity versus your projected volume. The numbers don't work. Lisa Chen leaned forward to look at the spreadsheet. Her expression shifted. He's right. We'd need to increase hub capacity by at least 30% or reduce simultaneous transfers. Robert looked like he'd been slapped. Ms. Sinclair approved this initiative. Then maybe we should discuss the capacity issues with her before implementation, Lisa said calmly. The meeting ended badly. Robert was angry. Lisa was diplomatic. And Ethan knew he'd just made an enemy. That evening, Victoria called him. I heard about the meeting, she said. Robert's mad. Robert's embarrassed. You publicly dismantled his proposal in front of the department heads. I was just pointing out the flaws. I know, and you were right. I approved that initiative because the projections looked good on paper, but I didn't dig into the capacity analysis the way I should have. Victoria paused. You saved us from a very expensive mistake. So why do I feel like I screwed up? Because you made a powerful man look incompetent. That has consequences. What kind of consequences? The kind where people start questioning whether you actually earned your position or if you're just repeating things I taught you privately. Ethan's stomach sank. That's not fair. No, it's not. But it's reality. Victoria sighed. I'm proud of you. You saw something wrong and you spoke up. That takes courage. But it also puts a target on your back. So what do I do? You keep doing good work. You prove you belong here. And you let me handle Robert. I don't want you fighting my battles. I'm not fighting your battles. I'm managing my department heads. There's a difference. But the damage was done. Over the next week, Ethan felt the shift. People who'd started to warm up to him became cold again. Conversations stopped when he walked into rooms. Robert made pointed comments in meetings about experience and qualifications. And then the email came. It was from an anonymous account sent to the entire logistics department. The subject line read, Special Treatment, and inside was a detailed timeline of every interaction between Ethan and Victoria. The promotion, the training, the hospital visit, the firing of Marcus, all presented as evidence of favoritism and inappropriate relationship. The email didn't explicitly say they were sleeping together. It didn't have to. The implications were clear. Ethan's phone rang within minutes. Victoria. Don't respond to it, she said immediately. Everyone's seen it. I know, HR is already investigating the source. But Ethan, listen to me. Don't respond. Don't defend yourself. Don't engage. People think let them think whatever they want. We know the truth. Do we? Because looking at that timeline, it's not wrong. You did give me special treatment. I gave you the training you should have received from Daniel. That's not special treatment. That's basic management. You paid for Lily's hospital bills. I created a company policy that helps multiple employees. Lily was the catalyst, but not the only beneficiary. You fired Marcus for talking about me. I fired Marcus for creating a hostile work environment, which he did, in front of witnesses. Ethan sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen. This isn't going away, Victoria. No, it's not. She was quiet for a moment. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. What does that mean? It means we've been trying to keep our personal relationships separate from work. But maybe that's making things worse. Maybe if we're honest about what we are, people can't use speculation against us. And what are we? Two people who care about each other trying to navigate an impossible situation. Victoria paused. I'm not asking you to go public if you're not ready, but I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of measuring every glance and calculating every interaction. I'm tired of being afraid that caring about you makes me weak. It doesn't make you weak. Then why does it feel like it does? Ethan thought about Lily, about stability and security and all the things he'd fought so hard to give her. Going public would make everything more complicated, but hiding was already tearing them apart. Okay, he said finally. Okay, what? Let's stop hiding. Let's be honest about what we are and deal with the consequences. Victoria was quiet. Then, are you sure? No, but I'm tired of being afraid too, Ramam. The next morning, Victoria called an emergency meeting of the senior leadership team. Ethan wasn't invited, but he heard about it from Lisa. Victoria had stood in front of the department heads and board members and made a simple announcement. She was in a relationship with Ethan Vale. It was consensual. It had developed outside of work. And to eliminate any appearance of impropriety, Ethan would be transferred to a different department, reporting to a different supervisor with no connection to her chain of command. The announcement sent shockwaves through the company. Robert demanded her resignation. 2 board members called for an ethics investigation. The rumor mill exploded. But Victoria didn't back down. She released a statement to the entire company explaining that personal relationships between employees at different levels weren't prohibited as long as they were disclosed and properly managed. She outlined the steps being taken to ensure fairness and transparency. And she made it clear that anyone who created a hostile work environment based on speculation would face consequences. Ethan was transferred to the operations department, working under a supervisor named James Park, no relation to Daniel. His desk was on a different floor. His projects had nothing to do with Victoria's direct oversight. On paper, they were separated. In reality, everything had changed. I can't believe she did that, Lisa said when she heard. She risked everything for you. I didn't ask her to. She did it anyway. That's what people do when they care about someone. Lisa looked at him seriously. Don't make her regret it. Ethan had no intention of making Victoria regret anything, but the pressure was immense. Every project he touched was scrutinized. Every success was questioned. People watched him constantly, waiting for him to fail so they could prove Victoria's judgment was compromised. He worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life. Came in early, stayed late, triple-checked every calculation. He wasn't just representing himself anymore. He was representing Victoria's decision to fight for him. 2 months passed. The scandal slowly died down as newer gossip took its place. Ethan proved himself competent enough that even the skeptics had to admit he belonged. Robert was transferred to the Portland office, officially for expansion purposes, unofficially because he'd created too much friction. And slowly, carefully, Ethan and Victoria built a life together. They were careful at work, professional, appropriate. But outside of work, they were something else. They were partners. They were a family. Victoria started staying over most weekends. She had a toothbrush in Ethan's bathroom, clothes in his closet, a favorite mug in his kitchen. Lily called her Victoria now, instead of Ms. Sinclair. Sometimes she even called her V when she was feeling particularly affectionate. It wasn't perfect. Victoria still struggled with being vulnerable. Ethan still worried about money, even though he didn't need to anymore. They fought sometimes, about work boundaries and parenting decisions and whether it was okay to eat cereal for dinner. But they showed up for each other, every time. 10 months after that first night in the warehouse, Victoria took Ethan and Lily back to CTEC's main building after hours. The warehouse was dark and empty, exactly like it had been that stormy November night. "Why are we here?" Ethan asked. Victoria led them to the roof access. It was technically off limits, but she was the CEO, so no one was going to stop her. They climbed the stairs to the roof where the city spread out below them, lights glittering against the dark sky. Snow was starting to fall. Just light flurries, but enough to make everything look magical. "I wanted to show you something," Victoria said. She pulled out her phone and brought up a document. It was a proposal for a new corporate initiative, the Vale Family Healthcare Fund, named after Ethan. It would provide comprehensive medical coverage for employees' dependents with chronic illnesses. "You can't name it after me," Ethan said. "I already did. The board approved it this morning." "Jeet." "Victoria, you saved this company. You changed me. You reminded me why I started this in the first place." She looked at him. "Let me honor that." Lily was watching them with wide eyes. "Does this mean other kids won't have to worry about medicine?" "That's exactly what it means," Victoria said. "That's so cool." Lily looked at her dad. "You're a hero, Dad." Ethan's throat was tight. "I'm not a hero, baby." "Yes, you are. You helped people. That's what heroes do." Victoria reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Ethan's heart stopped. "I know this is fast," Victoria said. "I know we've only been together officially for 10 months. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is complicated and messy and probably too soon." She opened the box. Inside was a simple ring. "But I also know that I've spent 10 years being alone and I don't want to be alone anymore. I want Saturday mornings and terrible cooking and someone who sees me. I want you and Lily and this life we're building together." Lily was bouncing on her toes, barely containing her excitement. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Ethan asked, his voice rough. "Yeah, I am." Victoria looked terrified and hopeful and so human it made his chest ache. "You don't have to answer now. You can think about it. Take your time. I just needed you to know that I'm sure. About us. About this." Ethan looked at the ring, at Victoria, at Lily who was grinning so wide her face might split. He thought about that first night in the warehouse when he'd been bleeding and exhausted and convinced he was about to lose everything. He thought about Victoria standing in the dark, watching him with those sharp eyes that saw too much. He thought about hospital rooms and coffee shops and coloring books, about learning to trust someone again, about building something real from all the broken pieces. "Yes," he said. Victoria blinked. "Yes?" "Yeah, yes, I'll marry you." Lily screamed with joy and threw her arms around both of them. Victoria started crying, actually crying, tears streaming down her face as she slipped the ring onto Ethan's finger. "I love you," she said. "I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you and Lily and this life we're building." "I love you too," Ethan said. "Even when it's complicated and messy and breaks all the rules." "Especially then," Victoria said. They stood on that roof in the snow, the three of them holding each other while the city glowed below. Ethan thought about how far he'd come from that exhausted warehouse worker who'd been invisible for 3 years. He thought about the CEO who'd forgotten how to be human until an 8-year-old girl reminded her. He thought about how life had a way of surprising you when you least expected it, how the worst nights could lead to the best mornings, how being seen by the right person could change everything. "Can we get hot chocolate to celebrate?" Lily asked. Victoria laughed through her tears. "Yes, definitely, with extra whipped cream." "And sprinkles?" "As many sprinkles as you want, sub." They went to the same cafe they'd gone to that first Saturday morning. Lily ordered her hot chocolate and talked nonstop about wedding plans even though no one had asked her. Victoria and Ethan sat across from each other holding hands, their fingers intertwined like they'd been doing this forever. "People are going to talk," Ethan said. "Let them talk. The board's going to have opinions. The board always has opinions. I don't care. I'm still just a guy who used to move boxes in a warehouse. No, you're the man who saved a company because it was the right thing to do, who raised an incredible daughter alone, who taught me that being strong doesn't mean being cold." Victoria squeezed his hand. "You're the man I'm going to marry. That's all that matters." Lily looked up from her hot chocolate. When's the wedding? We just got engaged 20 minutes ago, Ethan said. So? When is it? Victoria and Ethan looked at each other and laughed. Soon, Victoria said. As soon as we can plan something small and perfect. Can I be the flower girl? You can be whatever you want to be. I want to be the flower girl and also the ring bearer, and I want to wear purple. Done. They stayed at the cafe until it closed, talking about the future like it was something they got to plan together instead of something they faced alone. When they finally left, the snow was falling heavier, coating the streets in white. Ethan drove them home, to his apartment that was too small but felt exactly right. Victoria helped put Lily to bed, reading her 2 stories instead of 1 because it was a special night. When Lily finally fell asleep, they sat together on Ethan's worn couch. Are you scared? Victoria asked. Terrified, Ethan admitted, but in a good way. What are you scared of? That I'll wake up and this will all be a dream. That I'll be back in that warehouse bleeding and exhausted and alone. Victoria pulled him closer. You're not alone anymore. You're never going to be alone again. Neither are you. They sat in the dark holding each other while Lily slept down the hall and the snow fell outside. Ethan thought about all the nights he'd sat on this couch, wondering how he'd make it through. All the times he'd felt invisible and forgotten, and like he didn't matter. He mattered now. Not because of his job or his title or who he was marrying. He mattered because he'd stayed kind when the world pushed him to be hard. He'd stayed caring when it would have been easier to give up. He'd kept fighting for his daughter and for himself and for the belief that good things could still happen to good people. And sometimes when you kept fighting long enough, the universe surprised you. Sometimes the worst night of your life led to the best morning. Sometimes the person you least expected showed up in a dark warehouse and changed everything. Sometimes broken people found each other and built something whole. 6 months later, they got married in a small ceremony at the park where they'd first had hot chocolate together. Lily wore purple and carried flowers and cried happy tears. Mrs. Chen was there. Lisa Chen and her family, a few close friends. No board members, no executives, no one from the press. Just the people who mattered. Victoria wore a simple white dress and smiled more in one day than she had in the previous 10 years combined. Ethan wore a suit that actually fit and couldn't stop staring at his wife like he couldn't believe she was real. When they exchanged vows, Victoria promised to always show up, to never let work matter more than people, to remember that strength and softness weren't opposites. And Ethan promised to see her, always. Not the CEO or the ice queen or the woman who'd built an empire. Just Victoria. The woman who'd forgotten how to be human until an exhausted warehouse worker reminded her. They moved into a house by the lake. Not too big, not too small, just right for a family of 3. Lily got her own room with purple walls. Victoria set up a home office where she could work remotely when she needed to. And Ethan finally had a kitchen big enough to cook in even though he was still terrible at it. C-Tech thrived under Victoria's leadership. The Vail Family Healthcare Fund helped hundreds of families. The company culture shifted from cutthroat to collaborative. People still feared Victoria in board meetings, but they also respected her in ways they hadn't before. And Ethan built a career he was proud of, not because someone handed it to him, not because of who he married, but because he worked hard and proved himself and refused to believe that where you started determined where you ended. On their first anniversary, they went back to the warehouse roof. Just the 2 of them this time. The city spread out below, lights glittering against the dark sky. Do you regret it? Ethan asked. Risking everything for me? Victoria looked at him like he'd asked the stupidest question in the world. Not even for a second. Even when the board fights you? Even when people question your judgment? Especially then, because you taught me something my father never did. She took his hand. You taught me that being loved matters more than being feared. That showing up for people is more important than quarterly profits. That the right decision isn't always the profitable one. That's a dangerous philosophy for a CEO. Maybe. But it's the right one for a human being. Victoria pulled him close. Besides, the company's doing better than ever. Turns out treating employees like people instead of numbers is good for business. Who would have thought? Shh. Was. They stood together in the cold night air. The city, their witness. Ethan thought about how far they'd come. About the scared, exhausted man who'd bled on this warehouse floor, and the cold, lonely woman who'd watched him from the shadows. They were different people now, better people. Not because they'd fixed each other, but because they'd shown up for each other, consistently, honestly, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. "I love you," Ethan said. "I love you too," Victoria replied, "even when you make terrible coffee." "My coffee is fine." "Your coffee is awful, but I drink it anyway." "That's true love right there." They laughed and kissed and held each other against the winter cold. And when they finally went home, Lily was waiting up to make sure they'd returned safely. Because that's what families did. They showed up. They stayed. They loved each other through the complicated and messy and imperfect moments that made life worth living. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the single dad nobody noticed, and the CEO everybody feared found each other in a dark warehouse and built something beautiful from all their broken pieces. Not a fairy tale. Just a real story about real people choosing each other every single day. That was enough. That was everything.